whenever you're ready.
Hello, everybody. I think we just called that in the recording, but I'm going to keep that in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Keeping You Company, a podcast where Rick and I ramble on about things that we find interesting. Firstly, to have these amazing chats, which we enjoy, but also to keep ourselves company, and hopefully to keep you company too at home. Um, Hello, Rook, of course.
Hello, Scott Sword. Everyone at home, I hope you're ready to be kept company.
Oh, absolutely.
If
And
that first part of the audio did get caught.
I think it did. It was perfect. I'll have to check it afterwards. If it got like picked up halfway, I'll have to cut it out, and then obviously all this chat means nothing. But anyway, oh yeah, for people who are watching along, not just listening, we've got the return of Euro Truck Simulator. Yay!
Hooray!
We've got a drive that I did quite a long time ago. I think it was over Christmas. I think where I went from the south of Italy to Denmark. And it was a nice wee drive. So we're going to try and keep this chat. The chat's going to be a little bit shorter, and we'll talk about why in a bit. But it's also quite a nice drive for me because I saw, as we were passing Hamburg, there was a bridge in the distance off to my, I think it was on my right hand side as I was driving north, that I actually passed over in real life over during the summer months. So that was
Oh,
nice.
cool.
That was a nice little. Oh, look! I know that bridge. So I stopped in the game to take some photographs, and I showed it to the
Uh,
people who I was on holiday with. I was like, look, 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 look what I saw in the game. And obviously they weren't impressed because
that's still really fun, though.
it's great when that happens. They've done a really good job, especially now they're updating parts of the map like Germany, so they're really getting that sort of quality of life, and a lot more features are getting added in. So there you go. So hopefully you enjoy.
Awesome.
Hopefully everyone enjoys the drive, and hopefully the background volume won't be too long. So yeah, why a slightly shorter recording? Well, I mean, to be fair, quite a lot of our recordings recently have been quite lengthy, just because of the topics that we've been discussing. Right, we've kind of gone in depth with
Yeah.
them. So yeah, this one's going to be a little bit more sort of spontaneous, sort of a random mixture of things. But also, we're recording this way in advance, probably, of when you're going to see it, unless things suddenly change. We're recording this on the 25th of February, in case anyone wants a date check. So obviously, we haven't seen any feedback from the previous episode. So yeah, it's just the way. So I guess the question is, and also some of you might be noticing, I don't know if it's audible to you, Rook, but I'm a little bit sick. I am, as the joke I do every time, I'm down with the sickness. Wah ah ah ah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone will get that reference, but if you do, great. Do you know that reference?
Sort of. I know it's secondhand. So I know that it's a reference to a song that was very popular over here when I was growing up. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but I was still in school, so I'll say it when I was growing up.
Probably right. It was like mid
Yeah.
2000s, I think. That song came
Yeah.
out. That sounds about right. Yeah.
And I was never really into that kind of music, so I never really paid much attention to it, but I've heard that part of the song enough that I recognize it as a reference.
Right. Okay.
I
That's
think you have an early Keeping You Company where you made that reference and was like, anyone who can name the song, you'll get a gold star or something. And I was like, well, I know you're making some sort of rock song reference, but I don't actually know what it is, so I'll just
ah.
say it.
That's okay. Well, the band is Disturbed, who are probably more famous now for more modern audiences. They did a really nice cover of I've got the lyric and not the song. Oh, The Sound of Silence. There we go, by Simon Garfunkel.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're really kind of known for now, I'd guess. But yeah, there's from I think their first album. It's probably early to mid 2000s, and yeah, the song's called "Down with the Sickness," and it starts off with the singer going "wah." So I always do it. That's just always the thing I say. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it'll get tiring, that joke, but I don't care. So, what on earth is going on? Why are we recording a podcast so far in advance? Why is it a shorter podcast? Why is Scott Sword recording even though he's sick? Right? What is happening? What is going on in our lives that is going to make it very difficult to record the? I guess this is going to be the April episode. So, what is going
Mm-hmm.
on? At least on your side. What's going on in your side, Rook?
Well, on my side, I just I'm in the process of switching over, so I still am working on, because it's still February. I'm still working on the next episode of Translation Born. That's going to wind down, and then I have to wind up on a new series that I'm doing, where I'm going to be recording myself doing more of a let's play, going back to sort of the original experience of Bloodborne when it came out 10 years ago. So I'm going to be releasing that starting on March 24th, if I remember the actual date of the release correctly, um, whatever that Monday is. And that's going to be an ongoing project. So, like, in terms of my personal projects, I've got that winding down and the other thing winding up. In terms of work, I've got a massive block like incoming for March. So that's going to eat up a huge amount of my time if there's any indication. And then I've just got a lot of additional family plans that everyone seems to have scheduled for March for some reason. So I've got a lot going on. I looked at my calendar. We were like, oh, surely we'll find another time to record between now and the beginning of April. And I was like, will we though?
Maybe not. So we're not leaving it to chance.
Because
basically.
there's two people, yeah. Especially because there's two people involved in this. Godsword, what's going on with you?
Well, yeah, my work is also going to ramp up from March onwards. And that was something that I did kind of know about in advance. But I think it's just like my time. I feel like my time is even more stretched than it was before because I'm doing my work, trying to look to also change fields as well, and hopefully, if the job market starts to cooperate, there will be more activity in that sort of in that vein. So I have to be ready to act upon it if I suddenly get an opportunity or something, and that takes up time, obviously. And then, yeah, as I was saying to you off camera, I'm actually got the privilege of presenting at a conference. Actually, depending on the timing of this podcast, it might just have happened or might be happening very soon. It just depends on when the Sunday in April falls. So yeah, I suddenly realizing, well, I'm going to have to try and put that talk together. That's going to need some time. And also, I'm going to be doing it in Spanish, so that's going to be an interesting challenge. But that means that needs more time
Yeah,
to prepare.
huge force multiplier.
Yeah.
I remember there was a point towards the end of my stay in Japan where I was like trying to write like articles and essays and things like I would write in English to go and show my tutor basically, and it just took so long to write even just like a page in Japanese. I was just like, oh, this is astonishing.
Yeah.
It's
So,
amazing how that happens. So hopefully it's not too hard for you to put together a presentation in Spanish.
well, I hope not. I mean, yeah, the thing I'm putting together is quite, in terms of what I'm going to be showing, is quite visual. But the problem is then I have to talk on top of it, and it's going to be in Spanish. It's like 10 or 15 minutes, I think. So it's not too long. I've done similar length talks. I've done longer talks before than that. But and obviously on this podcast we talk forever anyway. But it would just be the case of trying to make sure that the Spanish is at a good enough level, and I can have also enough wiggle room because I don't want to be working off a perfect script either. I don't want to be memorizing a script
Yeah.
because then it's just if something goes wrong or a question gets asked, I want to be able to think on my feet and not just be like, oh my god. It's like a comedian, right? Who they want to have that flexibility to adapt depending on what happens with the crowd or whatever. You don't want to have this really fixed timeline of how you're going to present something because suddenly you might suddenly realize on the day, all right, if we switch the order, it'll be better. I know for a presentation it's not quite the same thing, but
Hmm.
yeah. But I've already said to my Spanish teacher, I've got this presentation. We have to block off a couple of classes for us to go through this presentation and for you to give me feedback and figure out certain things. So we'll see. So we got that. Um, we're in the midst when as we're recording. But obviously, by the time this comes out, we'll be in the middle of it. We've got the new Fury of Dracula tournament starting soon, so I've got to get admin done for that. Once the tournament gets underway, the admin will be pretty light, and there's also three of us
Hmm.
doing the admin. But it's just the initial sign up period. We've had, I was saying to you off camera, we've had some people sign up not really realizing what they were signing up for because the tournament has a little bit of a slightly quirky format per se. It's a team tournament, but you're not playing in teams. You're playing in teams in terms of the results, but not in terms of actually playing. You're still playing 1v1. And I think that's caught out people, even though the poster clearly says 1v1. Doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So, and just trying to manage and trying to work out, are these people going to be reliable and all this sort of stuff, because we don't want dropouts later on. So once it gets underway, it'll be fine. But then obviously there's always a
Hmm.
risk. Then I'll just be tempted to do lots of live streaming of tournament games, which I've got to really clamp down on that and be like, no, no, you can't do everything. Stop it.
Hmm.
You're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to give it up some of it. I can't do everything. Also, because I'm streaming on Twitch now, and I'm doing that at least twice a week,
Hmm.
scheduled. But then also I've got, so the schedule I'm doing at the moment is Roller Coaster Tycoon on Mondays. Wednesdays then board game night, either Fear of Dracula or Wingspan. That might change during the tournament a little bit. But then I've started doing Tiny Glade, which is like this nice, really chill diorama sort of sandbox builder where you just build
Hmm.
whatever you want. If you want to recreate Hogwarts Castle, you can create Hogwarts Castle. If you want to create a nice little fantasy village or something, you can do that. Um, and I've had actually a lot of my audience come in because of that game, and they really like watching it. And I'm really enjoying the build that I'm doing. But that means that, oh my god, like I really want to play that game, but then I'm trying to work out where in the schedule am I going to be able to guarantee at least one stream of that every week.
Hmm.
I also did a stream the weekend just passed where we did some of that, and then it just came up in conversation. Oh, let's switch to something else. Let's do some board games, and I just started showing some people the audience who like Tiny Glade, some digital board games, and they were loving it. So,
Oh wow.
um, yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing over there, but it's now my time is even more stretched than it normally is. It feels like. And I
Hmm.
like, I want to do it. That's the thing. I mean, if I could spend every night streaming, I would. But I mean, eventually, when we get to the burnout episode, I've already felt kind of burnt out in certain
Yeah.
times with it, and I've had to say, nope, I'm not streaming tonight. Even though I'd love to, I'm not doing it because
Hmm.
I'm tired and I can't commit myself to it. So that's kind of important too, to be able to sort of, even if I'm still doing something, it's not streaming. I'm doing something else. I'm making a YouTube video or doing admin with it or whatever. It's not just being streaming in front of the camera. I don't know how these streamers can stream for, you're looking at like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day every day. It's just nuts.
Yeah. I don't understand it either. Like, I mean, I understand that they're doing that as their full-time job, but even so, to to make that setup work for that long, like I don't think I could physically do it. I think it would be too much for me.
Hmm.
There are like occasionally one of the fun things about working on video games is every now and then they come out and I can go and watch people stream the games. And it's really fun to have people go and like watch their reactions and see if they're reacting as I'd hoped. I also get to find out what happened to my work after I got rid of it, right? Because I'm usually not the last step in the script process. I'm usually towards the beginning.
Right.
So I can be like, "Oh, they changed that. Okay." Sometimes I think that's good, sometimes I think that's bad, but it's par for the course. But it's fun to go and watch that. And I just remember there was one game that I worked on. I was watching this person stream it, and they streamed the entire thing, like from start to finish. I think they put in a good like 60 hours playing the game. They did it in like almost the minimum amount of time required. They just didn't get any sleep,
Jeez,
stayed
bro.
up and streamed for like 20 hours at a time. And I was like, what are you doing? This would break my brain.
Hmm. And especially then when you got like an audience who kind of expects you to play a certain game, and if you're not in love with that, you see, I mean, I know it's
Hmm.
a different environment, but something like League of Legends, right? All these League of Legends streamers that become known for that, and all the
Hmm.
audiences tune in for that. And if they suddenly decide I'm going to play something different, 90% of their audience go, "All right, okay, we're going to go find somebody else who's streaming it then."
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Yeah.
I'm kind of not. I'm a little bit scared about it. I know my audience is very small, so it's not like, and I'm not as if I need my income doesn't depend on it in any way. Um,
Right.
Even though now I've reached affiliate level, the money, if there is any money that comes out of it, it's just purely a nice little cherry on top kind of thing. I'm not doing it for money.
Hmm.
But I've got quite a lot of audience come in because of the Tiny Glade stuff, this sort of sandbox builder.
Hmm.
And once I finish this big build that I'm doing, I'll probably want to take a break from it. As much as I enjoy it, I probably want to
Mm-hmm.
just go, well, I've bought quite a lot of other games as well. Let's just play something else for a bit. And I do wonder how many people are going to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't want to and they only want to see Tiny Glade, then that's understandable. But I'm hoping that in terms of the content I'm creating, and I think the board game stream that I did the other day was quite encouraging actually, because it showed that the audience were still keen.
Mm-hmm.
They were keen to watch me, maybe, rather than it doesn't have to be Tiny Glade,
Mm-hmm.
um, or whatever. So I thought that was kind of nice. So if I'm
Yeah.
building a community of an audience who are happy to watch me regardless of what I'm playing,
Mm-hmm.
then that'll give me a bit more confidence. I can suddenly go, right, after we finish Tiny Glade, let's do something else for a bit, and then we can come back to Tiny Glade later. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you sort of run into the same thing on YouTube as well, where it's not quite to the extreme that it is like when you're streaming on Twitch, where people will just like tune in to the one thing and that's really all they care about. Like YouTube, at least, if you've got a bunch of different content on your channel, they can like YouTube will be like, okay, this video for this crowd, this other video for this crowd is trying to categorize that stuff constantly.
hmm,
So, but I do feel like I feel like it's best to have a sort of identifiable like identity or slant to YouTube. And I've had like some thoughts about like because eventually at some point I'm going to be done with Bloodborne.
hmm.
We've talked before. I don't know when this mythical date will ever arrive,
At some
but at
point,
some
it's going
point
to happen.
it's
Right.
yeah, it's not the game is not infinite. So I'm guessing if my guesses have always been wrong, but I'm guessing it's going to take me like I don't know, maybe 6 months to do the like 1.00 playthrough. It's very tough to know. Um, and then after that, I think I've estimated based on the number of items I have stockpiled and yet to acquire, and I can't really account for the dialogues. I haven't done that yet. I will, but I haven't done it yet. Um, I'm guessing it's going to be another year for Translation Born, but at some point in the next like 2 years or so, I'm going to run out of Bloodborne stuff. And it's like, what do I do then? And I kind of like the idea of focusing on the translation angle because I feel like that's what I can uniquely offer to people. But I thought of like, what if I just want to play some other random video games, right?
Right.
I think it could be fun to record myself having experiences playing because I like to play D&D. I'm intrigued by the idea of Baldur's Gate 3. That game was a massive success. I've never played it, and I think it could be fun to have that experience. Is that something that I should put on my YouTube channel?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question then, right? Because it's gonna if
Yeah.
I mean, how many of your existing audience will tune in for it? Some, hopefully, but
Yeah.
there's also then, I guess it depends on. I think down the line, I guess if there's a clear sort of distinction, right? You've got this clear, you know, period of time on your channel where you're doing the translation board stuff, and then if you shift to like some sort of playthrough of Baldur's Gate, well, that's a
Hmm.
clear sort of distinction, and it's not like my YouTube, which is just this almost becomes like a random mess of just different uploads of different things. I've got the Fury of Dracula every week, there's Wingspan every week, but there's suddenly Tiny Glade will pop up, and Rollercoaster Tycoon will pop up, and also there's a Keeping You Company podcast every month. And if someone
Hmm.
was going on to come onto my channel for the first time, they might wonder, what the fuck is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
what is the theme of this channel exactly? It's just because it just more and more stuff has just grown from it. That's the problem.
Hmm. Yeah. And I do think, like I said before, YouTube's a little bit more accommodating of that because you can sort it all, you can put it all on a schedule, you can make it recognizable, right? People can know what they're getting in for, or they can, like, again, YouTube's pretty good about, even if they're not subscribed to their channel, if they're regularly watching one of your series, YouTube will be like, hey, a new video in this series from this channel has come out, just click on this video,
Right.
right? It's got that over Twitch, which is just a morass. I don't know how anyone finds anything on that website.
Well, with Twitch, I mean, the way like you do it is, yeah, if you don't follow the channel, then you could easily miss a lot of the stuff that they put out. Um, but then the way you often a lot of people do it is then instead of searching for a channel, they'll search for a game. So I've had a lot of
Hmm.
I've had some people, not I'm gonna say a lot of people, that's silly, but I've had quite a lot of people drop in to the stream and suddenly go, "Oh hey," and I'll be like, "Okay, how did you find me?" And they said, "Oh, we just searched for Roller Coaster Tycoon and we found you because we saw you were
Right.
streaming." So a lot of people search per game, and if it's a game that is fairly niche, then I might be the only person at that particular hour that is streaming Roller Coaster Tycoon. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's anybody interested, all the traffic goes to me then. So it can work that way. But yeah, if you don't follow, it's very
Mm-hmm.
easy to miss when a person's like. And ultimately, a lot of the things with Twitch is for the live angle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the advantage of Twitch is then even if you are watching something that the person doesn't normally that you wouldn't normally click on to watch, well, it doesn't matter because you can still interact with me or whoever the person is. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know anything about Wingspan as a Fury of Dracula player, where you can still come in and say hi to me, it's still me, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same person.
Yeah.
And there's a talking point. Oh, right, you've never seen Wingspan before, right? Okay, I'll teach you how to do it, and so on. So it's different to YouTube, right? Whereas with YouTube, I think there'll only be certain, I can draw a lot of audience from different places, and people can watch what they want. But at the same time, there'll be a lot of people from Fear of Dracula community who will just completely ignore all the other
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I upload.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. There's advantages to both. The streaming side is way better on Twitch. So in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, I'm really happy I committed and made the switch over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's going to be a kind of a big thing now when we do this tournament. Well, obviously we'll be a month into it by the time you see this podcast. I would have done the streaming of neutral game, not my own games, but neutral games on Twitch.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be interesting to see um, if that's a positive, if that's a net positive or not.
Yeah, I wonder.
We'll have to see. The chat, there's a way less delay between the chat and the actual live feed.
Oh,
So
cool.
so that's much better now. There's not this 30-second delay anymore, and then with lag and stuff, it gets even worse. It's
Yeah,
almost
I was gonna say
instantaneous.
30 seconds is a little bit is a little bit positive, right?
Right, right,
That's sort of best case scenario on YouTube.
yeah. And then yeah, if you start lagging out, you could be a minute behind.
Yeah, I've regularly been in streams where it's clear that either I or the streamer am like a minute away, a minute or even two away from the chat, and it's like, wow, this is ridiculous.
Right. So having it almost instantaneous would be kind of cool. There'll be a lot more dynamic
Hmm.
stuff going on. But at the same time, obviously on my channel, I've got a lot of very community based stuff.
Hmm.
So I've got like a lot of Twitch channels. I've got like the channel points, and people can redeem them to have silly sound effects, like go onto the screen.
Hmm.
I wonder if they're suddenly going to get activated in the middle of a Fear of Dracula tournament game.
Oh yeah,
and,
I
sud-
didn't even think about that.
and we'll suddenly get, I don't know, like Careless Whisper getting played on the sax while there's combat happening or something. So that's a slightly different dynamic that I hadn't really kind of expected. But I mean,
Hmm.
until we try it, we don't really know.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and other people have streamed Fury of Dracula games to Twitch before.
yeah, Wormtalon's done it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a faff thing getting onto YouTube afterwards. It's not a very clean system. It works. You can export it directly, which is kind of nice. You don't have to download and then import. But the fact
Hmm.
then you have to enter all of the details for the you can't just reuse the details from the previous
Hmm.
video. You have to copy and paste, manually, so to speak, or rewrite
Hmm.
everything. But I mean, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to set up the stream in advance. You just go into OBS and say start streaming, and you're live.
Hmm.
You don't have to think, right, let's schedule this for when am I going to schedule it for, blah blah blah. You just go, nope, I'm starting streaming now. So
Nice.
it's a lot more instantaneous, which I think is nice. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Um, but yeah, but that's basically it. We're gonna be busy little bees. So we thought, well,
Hmm.
even though I'm a bit sick, we'll take advantage. I hopefully I will mute myself so you won't have to hear me sneezing and coughing. But if you hear the sickness, then I do apologise.
All
Um,
right.
Alrighty. So I guess the first thing is also we had that the sort of the long episode that came out at the beginning of March, all to do with
Hmm.
language learning, and
Yep.
I think maybe kind of afterwards, I think at least for you, you're kind of having certain sort of afterthoughts about that episode, and there's certain
Yeah.
things
Well,
you
it
want
was
to follow
just
up with, and so on.
it was just Yeah, it was just sort of a thing where I started thinking, I framed because when I sat down to organize my thoughts, I like again, I didn't plan on this to happen. I just started writing them, and I created this like I forget how many, like 2.5 pages of notes, and I was like, whoa. And the structure that emerged as I was writing everything down was sort of an argument about how the best way for you to learn is to find what works for you and stick with it, because the biggest reason people stop learning a language is they just give up, right?
Mm.
They stop short, right? It's not that they couldn't get to the end line. It's just that they stop running the race before it's over, right? To stretch the metaphor a little. Um, so in that sense, I was like, okay, I think I like that angle, and I could build out all the things that I was thinking of to help make that sort of very basic argument. But in doing so, at the same time, it was like I realized after we recorded that episode, well, that's also sort of leaving out some less structured aspects of the language learning process, and like things that were helpful to me or that are just interesting about the language. That, I mean, we did get some of that because again, the episode was only only really sort of maybe half on that outline that I created, and we spent a good amount of time, particularly at the beginning, just talking about whatever aspect of language interested us and what our own path going through and learning the various languages that we've tried to learn was. So yeah, it's not like we had none of the freeform thoughts in that one, but I sort of started to think after we recorded it, maybe I should have used a different outline or something, because that would have left it open. I mean, maybe it's a good thing I did because it would have been even longer. I don't know. But I thought it was worth sort of revisiting with a couple odd thoughts here and there. And then Scott Sword coincidentally happened to send me an image or a video. I can't remember. I think maybe a video about this guy who made an argument about why learning a language is a waste of time. And I was like, well, I strongly disagree with that. Maybe you can go into more of what you were thinking with that.
Oh no, I mean I completely agreed with you. I was interested to see what you thought of it. But yeah, I mean I echoed your sentiments completely. So now I can't remember who it was, which is terrible. It was some sort of marketing expert, from what I remember
Hmm.
rightly. I can't remember who it is and if they are renowned or not. But the video is a very short video I saw on YouTube. I might post it in the comments. It was why Brits don't learn languages. Marketing expert explains. And then again, I haven't done my due diligence here. I don't know if it is a marketing expert or who it is, right? The
Hmm.
channel's called Marketing Brilliance, so maybe it's a very partial, right,
Hmm.
channel. But the argument that this person was trying to say was, for the example I think they gave was a British person learning Dutch. I guess it could be
Right.
applied for any language. For a British person learning Dutch, the uh, the amount of return that the British person gets from learning is minimal. So if they're trying to slowly work their way up the levels in terms of Dutch, right, from very basic phrases and then different verbs and whatever, right, all the different situations, as the Brit is going up that language ladder, if you want to think of it that way, the amount of reward they get is almost negligible, because the situation always goes they'll try to speak in Dutch. The Dutch person will realize that they're trying to speak Dutch, but they're not a native Dutch speaker, and then they'll instantly speak English to them. So that interaction did not conclude in Dutch. Whereas
Hmm.
the reverse is true for a Dutch person. If they are able to speak even the most basic bit of English at the beginning, they get more return out of it because they're speaking in a language that is more like global and all this sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and then, you know, I listened to this. I was like, well, yeah, that's very fair and well, but it's a very narrow way of looking at it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I mean, it's not like there's nothing to this argument, and I brought this up as well when we were just going back and forth on this in Discord via text, um, where I know someone who did this like intensive study period where he went to live in Denmark to study Kierkegaard and was learning Danish at the time and was trying to use his Danish, and everyone would come up to him and just talk in English because it was easier. And it's like, yeah, like if the point is just to communicate, there are certain languages, and this is going to be one of the limitations, but there are certain languages where the level of the other people around you are going to be higher in your native language, particularly if that native language is English, because it isn't fair, right? English does have a large population of people who speak it around the world, or can use it as maybe not their first language, but as their second language. It's
Right.
one of the big advantages that I've heard like touted about English, and it's one of the reasons why Japanese people learn English in school for, I don't know, from fifth grade through college.
Well, the statistics are that, um, also speaking as somebody who's learning Spanish, there are more native speakers of Spanish in the
Hmm.
world, but English is the biggest language once you take into account second language speakers.
Hmm.
It's enormous. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard Chinese is up there as well. I don't know what's actually
yeah,
number one, but yeah, like
I can't
Chinese I
remember
think is
now.
also
I think
more native speakers than English.
yes. Oh yeah, by miles. Yeah, but
Yeah.
once you take into account second language speakers, then English is the one. But the problem is like it's a very I don't know. I feel like it's a very cherry picked example. It's
It
such
is.
it's a bit of like a cliche. Oh yeah, the Danish are good at English. The Dutch are good at English. Okay, fine, but we could pick easily. I could cherry pick another country where it is
Hmm.
not statistically as good at speaking English, just for various reasons. I could even Spain. I would say even Spain, right? Even though Spain is getting better with the generations, but you know, depending on who you talk to here, they can't speak English.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a criticism. It's just, it's very easy just to pick one country, especially a country like the Netherlands, which has a relatively small population, right? Its neighboring countries in Europe do not speak more or less the same language. I know Belgium has its thing, but Dutch is not a widely spoken language in the world, let alone in Europe.
Hmm.
So, of course, they're going to try to learn to speak English to try to then communicate with Germans and the French and whoever, right? That's kind of normal. Um, and same with we talked about with Sweden. I think maybe that came up in the previous episode, right? Swedish people are generally known for being good at English. Why? Because they don't have a big media base because they're a small population, so they
Hmm.
import all English cartoons and stuff. And I don't think they dub them too much. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a cherry picked example. And yeah, as I said, I don't think it's wrong for the example that was chosen, but you could pick many other examples where that's not true in terms of countries. And also, I didn't like
Right.
it that the whole idea of learning a language is only some sort of economic commodity almost.
Yeah.
That, which I just
Yeah. And also like he was talking about it in the sense of like incremental benefits, right? There's almost no incremental benefit for me starting to learn this other foreign language. And it's like, well, in the case that you've provided, right? Maybe the person will switch to English, and that means that you can communicate just back and forth, get some ideas across easily without your having to necessarily put in effort. But even in the case of languages like that, there's still a benefit. He may not agree with the emphasis that I would put on it, but there's still a cultural exchange of information that you have to factor into it, right?
hmm,
Maybe learning some Danish expressions will help you understand the cultural aspects of dealing with people in Denmark or, Dutch people, right? Depending on which language we're talking about comparing. And that extent, like that more extensive cultural knowledge from your starting to learn that language will provide some extra background in your interactions that will be useful.
yeah. Even if you do end up speaking all of them in English, it's not
Yeah.
just the words like the attitude of the people and like their emotions and the way they use the language. Um, it's also like I would also argue that so let me try and phrase this correctly. I didn't really say this in the previous podcast, but the advantage I've really found by learning Spanish is that it helps me to understand how Spanish people learn English.
Hmm.
So then when I'm trying to teach, I can then say, "Ah, okay, I understand why you're making this mistake because you're thinking like this." And then I can
Hmm.
phrase things in a different way or show them. And also then, again, there's not a criticism. I'm just saying it. Native speakers will speak in a different way to people who speak as a second language. Is there's a
Yeah.
real barrier in getting to that real proficiency where you don't sound like a robotic speaker
Hmm.
and you actually have the correct intonation and the correct slang and the right moment where you throw in a swear or throw in informal language or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You pick your moments to phrase things a certain way. Whereas maybe as a language learner, you're more likely to default to this more kind of basic structure per se.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
um, so then yeah, being around that, you know, you're gonna experience it. I had a
Mm-hmm.
train of thought then it disappeared, but that's fine. I'll blame it on the sickness. It'll be fine. It'll come back.
Yeah.
If it's an important point, it'll come back. I think.
Yeah. I
So,
don't know if this is necessarily where you were going, but one thing that I was thinking when you like started to bring up your point was there's also the fact that learning a foreign language, not only does it help you learn how to communicate with people like the way that they're going to view your language, it also just helps you come to a better standing of your own language.
oh, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Of course it
So,
does. It makes you examine your own native tongue. And the number of
yeah.
times people have asked me, "Why is it like this?" And I always go, "I don't know." And then you have to think about it, and you'll realize certain things, or look up. You know, I've never looked up etymologies as much as I have since I've had to then try to teach my own
Yeah.
language. Right, it was before I didn't care about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think also too, like again, we're jumping around Thomas a little bit, but I don't like this sort of implication being, oh well, incremental steps are not beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's almost like if you know, if going from A to B and B to C and B and C to D is not worth it, then why on earth do you start in the first place? It's like, hello, you're on a journey. You're going to get to D eventually. But you have to
Yeah.
take that journey. You can't just jump straight to D. That's ridiculous. Like the meme, I don't know if you've seen it, where the person tried to climb the stairs, and instead of taking one step at a time, they try to take 6 steps at once.
Uh,
And they're missing out all the fundamentals. It's like, you have to take incremental steps. You can't just jump from A to, you know, from the start to the end. You have to go
mm-hmm.
through that journey. That's the whole point of it. It just, I don't know, it just seems like, I don't know. It's just all been,
Yeah.
it all seemed to be, more I thought about it, just seems to be more approached from this economic, almost like argument kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Very
just,
transactional. Yeah.
right. And that's just the fun's been taken out of it.
Yeah.
And the culture and all the interesting bits and yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
frustration and there's annoyance along the way, but um, and I think there's a really nice comment in that video, and somebody said, yeah, but it's not just the even if the person, whatever language it is or whatever country we're talking about, even if they do reply to you in English, it's this is there's a goodwill aspect that you have gone
Mm-hmm.
up to them and you have
Mm-hmm.
been willing to try to communicate in their native tongue, even if you find it
Right.
really difficult. There's that sense that going, okay, this person is really trying. We'll
Mm-hmm.
help them out, and you almost start the conversation on a good footing, rather
Right.
than barging in arrogantly going, oh well, the whole world's going to speak English to me, so what's the point of me even trying? I think
Right.
that would piss me off more as a if it was
Yeah.
a yeah if the roles were reversed. How dare
Mm-hmm.
you just assume that you can walk into this shop or country or whatever it is and you're going to speak and everyone can speak English, so why should you bother?
Mm-hmm.
At least, and it's been so validating for me personally, even though Spain is not known for being this very, prolific country in terms of speaking English. It's definitely getting better, and it will be with the generations getting, the new generations coming through, and they're learning it, when they're even younger. But the number of
Mm-hmm.
times where even if I've had a really, messy conversation, people have still been really nice to me and said, "Oh, your English, your Spanish is good. How
Mm-hmm.
long have you been living here? Oh, X number of years or whatever. Oh, your Spanish is good. Keep going." That just makes it all worthwhile, to be honest. All those little
Yeah.
interactions with people, and I think it just seemed to be missing from that video. The more and more I thought about it, the more and more pissed off at it I got.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely something to that where it's like I think that sort of transactional approach is very like one of the things that's off-putting about it is just the sheer level of arrogance that comes with it, right? Like, well, clearly you can speak my language, so let's just use that, right? Because there's no benefit to me learning yours. Really? Is there none?
It's just very.
Yeah.
You can just speak from a position of privilege, and that's just very dangerous, I feel. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I think, yeah, we're on the same page about that for multiple reasons, as I've said. But it's just one of those things where I can understand where that person's coming from. And I had, so this is going to like shift the topic a little bit, but I had a interesting conversation with a friend of mine who works as an interpreter at a company where they make auto parts.
hmm
And uh, we were talking about like AI being used in translation, which I'm pretty much like I'm not very happy with. Uh, to be fair, the latest and greatest AI models aren't the things that I have a lot of experience working with, but the models that I do have experience working with are terrible for Japanese to English translation. And I remember I was working on this, it was a presentation. It was just this business like presentation where I was translating things that were going to go into these things, and it was just like the AI doesn't know that this particular thing is a header and this particular thing is a subheader and this particular it doesn't have, and all that context is really important. And it's like, okay, it doesn't consider how this is going to look on a slide. And I was doing this job, and I've since, it was such a harrowing experience that I've since like said I won't do this sort of work anymore. They call it machine translation post editing, or I guess it'll be AI post editing soon. Um, where they've had the computer go through everything first and then you edit it. And I was like, I'm basically just doing this all from scratch. And I couldn't believe the amount of creativity that I was being asked to pull to like put into this like PowerPoint presentation about like agriculture in this one Japanese prefecture. And I was like, this is astonishing. Like, I don't understand how anyone can make use of this. And my friend from the from the audio company was talking about how, well, I think there's an important distinction to be made here, which is you're talking about translation as a product. When I'm talking about translation as a means of communication, that stuff is amazing because no, it's not going to be as polished. It's not going to be like appropriate to the context. It's not going to have all that creativity, all that like careful checking that goes into the thing that I was doing for this PowerPoint presentation. But someone can look at it who doesn't speak that language and they can get the gist.
mm,
And a lot of the times in the company where he works, that's the important thing. And a huge amount of his job would be just dealing with people who need to get the gist and him being like, but it has to be perfect. And so that would eat up a huge amount of his time and sort of waste theirs. And his ability to now be like, just throw this into this either machine translator or AI tool, and it won't be perfect, but you'll get what you need out of it. That was hugely liberating for him. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting perspective. Because yes, and I think that's an important distinction, right? There is this sort of translation as product, which you really need a human for, I think.
mm.
And then there's translation just to get across the gist, just to communicate some ideas, make sure that some person can like check something off a list and then move on to the next thing on their, taskbar or whatever. Like that sort of level of communication, it like you don't have to have it perfect. And so I think you can sort of take that and maybe make a similar comparison with the language learning thing where it's like, okay, if all we care about is like showing up at, executive level meetings and talking to one another, maybe it's not necessary for each person to learn the other's language. But, that's a fairly narrow use case, isn't it? Maybe that's why the marketing perspective is sort of slanted.
Yeah, I don't, cause I don't know in terms of the video who exactly. I mean, I should undo diligence to research it, but like the audience at which this idea was being pitched.
Mm.
If it's full of all business execs, then right, there might be a certain point to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting thought in terms of the difference in what the translation has been used for. You're thinking about it from I guess the question is, um, the medium through which you're communicating with the other person. How long lasting is it? If it's just going to be this like quick conversation, then okay, you can find your way around with these AI translators and all the like, right? But if it's something that's going to be on record, something like a video game or a book or something that's going to be around,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to pass through many hands, so to speak, or pass through many ears, if we're going to do it from a language perspective, right? Then yeah, you want to get it perfect. You want to produce something that you can look at and go, yeah, I'm proud of that.
Hmm.
It's been done to a high standard. Um, yeah, there's no point putting in. I was about to say phrase an argument, and you might be able to counter it, but again, you have to think about the reward versus the amount of effort you put in. And now I'm
Hmm.
starting to sound like the marketing guy.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing about it from the perspective of you shouldn't learn a language.
Right.
I'm thinking about it in terms of just, when would there be cases
Hmm.
when, you could maybe get away with not doing it. But again, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't sound too much like the marketing guy because I do, on the whole, disagree with that
Hmm.
whole perspective, and I feel you miss out on so much
Oh
um,
yeah.
if you don't
Totally.
put the effort in, even for the most basic things. Like people do genuinely, if there'll always be people who don't, but the majority of people will genuinely care if you show an interest in their culture
Hmm.
or in their language or whatever. It's very instinctive to do so. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I feel like everybody universally, like if you show up and start trying to talk their language, you're right. If that's going to form goodwill, they're going to be like, oh, they're making an effort to really engage with something that feels personal to me, right? So makes total sense.
yeah, so yeah, we're on the same page with that one. I mean, I think maybe you didn't see it, but underneath when I sent you the link, I sent like the little emoji that Snuff likes with like the little O and then the dot and then the big O to be like, oh, really?
Oh yeah.
um, so yeah. I was I don't know how that even popped up, by the way. I don't know where that came from. It just suddenly popped up
Hmm.
on my YouTube Shorts. I was like, oh well then, right?
Yeah.
Let's send this to Rook. I'm sure he'll have plenty of opinions on this. Um,
Yeah. And so I did.
right.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to a couple follow ups that I thought of that I just can briefly run through for Japanese. One thing that I think it is super interesting about the process of learning Japanese is, and this is something that used to always like strike me as weird, because I would watch anime or play video games or do something in a Japanese cultural setting, and you'd see depictions of these kids in their Japanese language classes, and part of their assignment for their Japanese language class would be to stand up and read a passage out loud.
Hmm.
That's just part of the classroom learning experience. Like, I don't think I would always compare that to my experience learning English, and it's like, okay, when I'm in high school, I'm not standing up and reading something from a famous piece of literature as part of the class, right? I'm I'm like analyzing the themes. We're talking about the characters. We're doing stuff like that. I don't know what it was like for you, Scott Sword. Um,
We did a bit of both. There was a bit of out loud reading. Um,
okay.
I think a lot depends on what the objective of the class was. As we got older and older, there was a lot more focus on analysis.
Right.
Um, but there were points where, especially when we were doing Shakespeare, we had to try to learn to memorize certain
Mm-hmm.
passages. So then there'd be practice of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember when we did. The only classic novel I did in school was The Mayor of Casterbridge. Did we? I think at some point the teacher would have asked us to read part of it out loud, or to sort of have a dialogue between two people, and we won't go back and forth on it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of like as a very systematic way, then no.
Yeah. So sounds fairly similar, and I think the Shakespeare case, in like theoretically, if you were going to also try like Middle English or something like that, right? There are cases you can make where the language gets strange enough where it's like, okay, yeah, I want you to read this out loud because you need to have that experience. And I think that's actually a good bridge to why they do it in Japanese. And I learned this because I went to a tutoring session. I mentioned earlier when I was living in Japan, I had a tutor for 2, 3 years, I think. And the one of the chief forms of tutoring, because I think I was either in the process of or had already passed the N1 Japanese language proficiency test at that point. So I was a pretty high level. I was just looking to get someone who I could regularly talk to in Japanese, because I was surrounded by this whole like you're teaching English system and you want to talk English around those people as much as possible. So I was like, okay, let's do this. And basically, all these tutoring sessions came down to me reading out loud articles from the newspaper, like opinion pieces from the editor of these famous Japanese newspapers, and I'd read them out loud, and my tutor would check that my understanding was correct. And it was astonishing to me how much more difficult it was to read Japanese out loud than it is to just scan it visually.
Mm.
Because there are so many like weird use cases for kanji where, 90% of the time you'll read this one kanji that stands for I as me. Uh, it's a very clearly, it's me, it's me, right? It means I. And every now and then, it'll be like, nope, this is special. Same exact character, same exact, I think it's the same exact meaning. It might be a slightly different meaning, but I think it's the same one. But this time it's read as ma.
Oh.
And it's, oh, how do you know that? You just memorize it. You just learn it. It's like, this context, this reading. Okay. um, and there's all sorts of different kanji that are like that. And so you get to this experience where if you're not reading out loud, first of all, you don't have to know what the reading is. You can just look at it and be like, oh, that means I get it, and you can move on. And another thing that I discovered that I was doing was it was easier for me to read dates in English in my head, right? So rather than be like, okay, let's see, 2月25日, 2025 nen, right? Which is February 25th, 2025. I would just look at the dates in the Japanese and instantly convert that in my head to, oh, it's February 25th, 2025, because it was just faster for me to register the meaning that way.
Right.
But when I had to read it out loud, I couldn't cheat.
That's right.
And so, like, all of a sudden, it was like I had to be held to account for all these kanji readings that I could just sort of skim over. And it was really hard to develop the skill that I developed in English a long time ago of being able to, like, read far enough ahead with my, like, eyes in my brain that I could then determine what sort of emphasis to use with a sentence. And I mean, that's something that I could still probably use a little bit of practice for in English, like the amount of times I have to do like double takes on translation-born scripts, but still, it's way harder. Yeah, it's way harder in Japanese. And so it was this revelation to me, be like, oh, now I understand why all these Japanese classes have the kids reading out loud from the classics. Because first of all, those are classic texts, which means they're more like Shakespeare, right? The language has changed since those texts were written. So there's all sorts of like old-timey weirdness that's involved in what's going on. And it's a perfect way of testing whether or not the students have a good understanding of what all the readings are and what all the meanings are involved in the passage that they're reading. And it's actually a really high-level test of your Japanese if you want to just sit down and try and read sentences of Japanese out loud in a way that sounds like flowing and natural. It's really hard to do. And I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He came over and we were playing through a video game, and I had the language in Japanese, and I was like, by the way, I learned like from this experience with my tutor that it's really hard to read Japanese out loud, even though you can get it silently. And he was like, I don't believe you. I was like, okay, read this off the screen. And within a sentence, he was like, oh yeah, this is really hard. So I like ever since I had that experience, like I can now say, yeah, I recommend if you're studying Japanese and you want a good grasp of what you're learning, like go find, like, it doesn't have to be at the super highest level necessarily, right? If you're at a relatively beginner level, find sentences or like go find a graded reader or something that I talked about in the last episode that are written out at the fairly basic level that's appropriate to where you're at, and just try reading things out loud and notice how you can't cheat anymore. And how much harder that makes things. And that can be a really good way to learn. And also, if you don't want to go quite that far, but you still want to stretch yourself a little bit, you can get an audiobook and like a visual book of any. It can be an ebook, it could be a physical copy, whatever. As long as you have a visual medium to look at the book while you're listening to a native speaker do a reading of the same thing, that can also be a great way to practice.
Right. Especially in terms of, understanding the relationship between spelling and pronunciation and intonation and all this. It's, and the pace and everything. It's interesting you said that thing about the years, because I've got the same, I know, different problem, but I've got the same issue in Spanish, because in Spanish they don't allow the, So, for example, the current year in English is 2025, right?
Hmm.
And it could also be 2025,
Yes.
depending on how you think about it. Um,
Hmm.
in Spanish, the only option is 2025. You can't say
Mm.
2025. You can't say 2025 in Spanish. It doesn't make sense. But that means that
Hmm.
anything pre the millennium, you have to say literally, like a number.
Hmm.
You can't say 1974. You have to literally
Hmm.
say in Spanish 1974. I've had quite a lot of texts recently where there's been a
Hmm.
lot of years in the text, and I end up just getting like breathless. Just trying to read it out, and every time I see a year appearing, I'm like, oh, joder, another one. Right, vale, 1900. Like, oh my god, really? That's just such a pain. I just read the number and go, yep, I know what that number is. What a
Hmm.
pain, what a nuisance. So yeah, it's fun. And then it's funny when you
Yeah,
hear
that's
Spanish
a
people then going, oh yeah, I was born in 1986. I was like, were you? There's something sounds very strange about that sentence. So yeah,
yeah. That's a
it's
funny point of overlap, but yeah, that's definitely something that I do with Japanese.
mm, you just read the
I mean, to
number
be
and
fair,
go, yep, I know what that is.
yeah,
There's
to
no
be
worse.
fair, it's a little bit easier now that it's 2000, at least in Japanese. I don't know how it is in Spanish, but
Well, yeah, 'cause
yeah,
you don't have to worry about the whole 100 bit, right?
right. You can just skip that part, so that makes it easier. But yeah, and then of course there's the imperial year, which Japanese will use. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, where it's like, okay, this was Showa 74, and you're like, okay, what was that in
In
actual like Gregorian calendar years, right? Like,
mm,
I don't know, Showa 74 might not actually exist, so
yeah,
I just
just
I
in
just pulled that
case.
out of thin air. So disclaimer, that might not actually be a year, but they have the right. They have the regnal name of the emperor, which is different than the emperor's personal name. Uh,
Oh,
that dubs for like the era,
right.
and then they have the number of that reign. Right? It's crazy, and so it's like,
Goodness.
okay, yeah. So now we're in Dewa, and before that was Heisei, and before that was Showa.
I know the UK loves the monarchy, but gee, we don't even go that far.
Yeah.
We're not that dedicated. Imagine if they come up with that idea now. We'd be like, nope, we're not
Hmm.
going along with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
seem to recall from a History of Japan podcast episode that they sort of reintroduced that after a certain point, like sometime after World War II. There was a push from more of the right-wing side of the Japanese government to be like, the emperor needs to be more important, so we're gonna make all official documents. You have to use the regnal year. It's like, okay, thanks. You just made everything way more complicated.
I want to have a quick follow-up point because it suddenly popped into my head. Still, also coming back to that marketing video. But
Hmm.
the other thing I want to quickly, because I wrote it down on my post-it note with lots of scribbles underneath. Talk about this. Is also the other thing. Sorry to go off topic again, but um, the thing you miss if you don't try to learn a foreign language is you do not appreciate how difficult it is to learn a foreign language.
Yeah, that's another thing that's true.
I do get a bit pissy with people who complain about foreigners not speaking English well enough, especially if they're
Yeah.
living in the UK. And I go, all right, okay, you try and learn Romanian or Italian or whatever language it is, and let's see how far you get then.
Hmm.
I think you need to be able to and I've definitely got even more appreciation as I've gone through more and more with Spanish, how difficult it is because every language, not I mean, English and Spanish are not the same as English and Japanese are not the same, but every language has its difficulties, it has its quirks, it has
Hmm.
its exceptions, it has that cultural difference tied in as well, and it's very hard to dedicate yourself to. Also, depending on where you learnt it, imagine you learnt it back in your home country where the only time you maybe speak that language is with your classmates, if you're lucky.
Hmm.
And it's very hard to do it. And then suddenly to move
Yeah.
to another country, we have to then speak this other this other language that you've learned every day. It's tough. It's
Hmm.
not easy. So yeah, again, I wanted to throw that in there. That's another reason why I'm more pissed off with the marketing guy.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
It comes with that arrogance as well, right?
Hmm.
Not only is I've got the privilege of being from a country whose official language is superior in terms of globally speaking, but yeah, you also miss out on how tough it is for people. And that's why I always say this: if I meet somebody who has passed like the C1 exam, for example, and you could tell they didn't just fluke it, they genuinely have that level. I think, damn, you speak very well. That's not even the top
Hmm.
level either, by the way. The C2 above that. When you meet a good speaker, even if they still make mistakes, of course, everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers make mistakes. But when you meet somebody who's got that level,
Hmm.
I always think, damn, you speak really well, and you've gone
Yeah.
through a lot of work to get there.
Hmm.
So sorry, I just want to throw that in because otherwise I'll forget because my mind is already my mind is normally a sieve. At the moment, it's like a colander. So that thought would be gone forever if I didn't bring it up now. So apologies for that.
Yeah. No worries. Actually, reminded me of another story where we had a supervisor come in, uh, and at the same year that we got in the people who came from the United Kingdom and started working in our office in Japan, uh, all of whom I think I variously offended at different points. Um,
Oh, like the one who needed help and you didn't help.
right, and the one whose tea I just kept sampling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all these people, they came in one year, and at the same year we changed supervisors, and our new supervisor, this guy was something was going on with this guy. um, but just to give you an example of what I mean when I say that, he came in and he was like, "Oh yes, I understand. We need to provide support. They don't understand the language. You know, there's all these kanji that they don't know. They haven't studied Japanese before. Of course." 2 weeks later, same guy is like, "Haven't they learned Japanese yet? What is wrong with them?"
Oh my god.
It's like, do you understand what you're saying? And he's like, their spoken level is way better than, like, how can they not even read up to their spoken level? And it's just like, there's 2,000 kanji, and they're like, well, is that really that hard to learn? Like, man, in 2 weeks.
Oh,
And of course, this is my supervisor, so I can't give my raw reactions. But still, it's like,
right.
what are your expectations, man?
I think you must have just set the bar way too high.
That's the problem. Yeah,
So
all of the like long-standing ALTs did have pretty high levels of Japanese. So yeah, I don't think that helped.
you got when you got the new influx,
Hmm.
they were nowhere near your level.
Yep.
I don't think you've done a lot of good for uh, transatlantic relations, Aruk.
No, I really, it's been a rocky relationship.
Hopefully we're repairing it with this podcast. But yeah, the special relationship is under strain.
Absolutely.
Oh, oh dear. Trying to think. Do I have any follow up? I mean, I guess the only follow up is something that I posted with you, but just the whole progress thing. I had some Spanish homework this week. And
Hmm.
I had to write an album review, and obviously, because it's about music, so I threw myself at that task.
Hmm.
And I actually wrote it about Year of the Tiger, the one of the songs that features on the Desert Island disc. Well, Year of the Tiger didn't, but
Ah,
Love Can Only Heal was from that album.
yes.
By Miles Kennedy, obviously. And um, and I was like, well, actually, I did album reviews when I first started Spanish back in the day. I remember doing one where I made this nice little A4, almost like, and I got it printed, but almost like something you would see in a magazine, where you'd have like little reviews, rather than having one review covering the whole page. It was like lots of like little mini reviews. I
Hmm.
had like one for a film, one for a book, and one for an album, if I remember rightly, or there's something else I can't remember now.
Hmm.
And actually, it was Fortress was the album that I reviewed, and I looked at what I'd done then 7 years ago
Hmm.
and the work I did now, and it just hit me. I was like, oh damn, okay, right, I have actually progressed. But sometimes you
Yeah.
don't see it, right? Because
Yeah.
you're so caught up with the day to day stuff. You don't see
Hmm.
that only when you look back and you realize, oh yeah, okay. Um,
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, in the JET program, they would talk about like it's gonna feel like you haven't learned anything, and then your family or your friends or someone's gonna come to visit you, and you're gonna be able to navigate your city like perfectly and realize, oh, wait a minute, right? It's like those moments are gold. It's like, wow, I really have made progress. Yeah, you're also giving me some context because he sent me photos of the various reviews, and I did not realize that you had written those things. And I was like, what is going on? It's like
I,
here's an article on Fortress, and here's an article on Year of the Tiger, and you sent me like how it started, how it's going, and I was like, it started with Fortress, and now it's Year of the Tiger. What does that mean?
no wonder, yeah. To be fair, I gave you like zero context to that. I woke up in the morning and all I saw was three question marks. I was like, how does a rook not understand this? I realize now, looking back, I provided like zero context for that. Yeah, they were both written by me. Um, so
Cool.
I
Yeah,
can.
that makes way more sense now.
Um, so yeah, it's just you see it over time, right? And that's kind of the if that is my A, if the first one was my aim, it's not really A, right? 'Cause I had learned a little bit of Spanish at that point, but I'd only been going for about
Hmm.
maybe. Well, I did that in my private class. I'm trying to think. That's probably I had my three beginner classes, and then I took a break. So that's probably during the
Hmm.
first sort of block of my private classes I wrote that first album review. But if you're reading it, like there's no, it's all present tense.
Mm.
There's zero, yeah, it's all present tense. And I probably had to look up quite a lot of the adjectives as well, by the way.
I believe it.
Whereas now I'm looking at the other one. I've got participle clauses. I've got present tense, past tense, future tense. Well, I got future tense in there. Maybe not. I've got conditional form. Uh, what's it called? Like contrasts, all that stuff. It's like, yeah, yeah. If that's the A and D, right? But it was
Hmm.
worth the B and C,
The B and C. Yep,
right?
absolutely.
So it's worth it, people. If
Yep.
everything worth having is no, is that right? Everything worthwhile like is difficult, but
Right.
it's
Takes
worth it in
effort.
the long run.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Hmm.
So, I guess that's for now. That's my only follow up. I guess we'll find out in the next podcast how my conference went, and if it crashed
Yeah,
and
we'll find out.
burned, and I have a lull in my language learning journey, or if it's
Hopefully
another
not.
step in the right direction. We'll have to see.
Yeah. You have reminded me in the course of this story and your hope for the future. You have reminded me of another piece of advice that I found incredibly useful when I was learning Japanese, which was don't try to say what you want to say what you can say.
Hmm.
And I just found that so useful because it's very frustrating to have an idea in your head in English and not be able to express that in the language that you're learning.
Yeah.
But if you try and force yourself to think only with the parts of your brain that you've trained to learn that second language, then you can actually probably say more than you would think. And so try and rethink how you might phrase something naturally in English so that you can say it in that foreign language and you can get further than you might believe.
Hmm. I'll find a new way of saying it. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've heard that advice before, and it definitely rings true. And I might have said it in the previous podcast, but when I was initially starting to learn um, Spanish, I got not frustrated like in a way that I was going to quit or anything. I don't mean it like that, but I just naturally get a bit frustrated because I always want to progress. I want to keep moving forward, and
Hmm.
I said it as soon as I got the present tense like sort of nailed down more or less. I want to learn the past because suddenly I want to say everything in the past.
Hmm.
And then the minute I finish learning, the minute I learnt the past, I instantly started thinking I want to learn the future now because I want to talk in the future. And sometimes you just have to take a little bit of a step back and go, whoa, you'll get there eventually. Let's just
Hmm.
don't rush it. Um, you need to be able to appreciate the usage of one thing first and build up It's not just it's not even just like grammar either, right? It's the all the other bits and pieces you learn along the way as well. It's not just all that stuff. So I see it also too with people over here when they they really struggle to try and put something together in an everyday sort of situation, basic conversation about their weekend or something, and they really struggle for the vocabulary. And then the minute I say, "Oh, okay, tell me about your job," oh, boom, right, they're off.
Yeah.
They know all the technical vocabulary. They're telling me all these engineering words. I'll be like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, even in English, by the way, because I haven't heard of any of these words. They're like, no, 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 these are the words in English. I'm like, I'm going to take your word for it. I haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, yeah, it's interesting when, yeah, it's suddenly a different part of the brain unlocks, right? It's not just what you know, but it's also what you're familiar with, and then you can demonstrate. Anybody can seem silly if you're in a situation where you don't know anything about that topic in any language. So, yeah, no, but I've heard that advice before, and I definitely say that's very, very true. There's always new ways, and you can see it a different way, and a lot of the time it's in English, or going into Spanish, is try and think of a more literal way of saying something.
Right.
Often then you can then express more stuff. So that's a good one. I like that.
Cool. Okay, so those are the things that like came to me when I was like, these don't really have anything to do with, staying on the treadmill, sort of the advice that I was putting together last time, but they were useful and helpful for me. So that's pretty much all I think I had as well for follow-up.
Cool. I guess the only thing we can do is then if there's any comments to the previous podcast, then we can talk about it in the next podcast.
Yeah, we'll just stretch language learning forever. It's an ongoing process, people.
Exactly. So I guess then the podcast about it will be an ongoing process, right?
That's right.
Very appropriate. Very, very meta. Well, since we got about an hour 15-ish to go, but for some reason, oh goodness me. Oh, what happened there? Okay,
Uh-oh.
on OBS, the video is still playing, but the timer associated with it is freezing. But I'm still driving.
Okay.
Okay, so we have about an hour and 50 minutes left, so we're trying to think of other things that we can talk about without diving into a really, profound
Right.
conversation. So all the things we had on this for... Oh, is there something you want to bring up beforehand?
No, I was just going to summarize. No homework-heavy episodes.
Right, yes, exactly. And we will have other ones of them coming up, because there is a really nice one I think we want to talk about at some point. Very different from the vibe that we've been talking about, all the times we've been talking about. But we're trying to think of things, just sort of fill in the gaps a little bit, and something we could just sort of dip in and have a bit of fun with. So one of the ones was funny travel stories, because obviously
Yes.
you've travelled. Well, I mean, at least in terms of going to Japan, you travelled quite a bit back and forth, and I'm sure you would have done
Yes.
other travelling as well as that. And obviously, not that I've been on as many long haul things, but I have flown long haul once. Not to be smug, but I have flown long haul once. But I've obviously travelled back and forth between the UK and Spain quite a bit, and also I've done exchanges with school and that. So we have been on quite a lot of trips and things, at least between our home country and countries that we visited, but also inside the country. So if we got any funny anecdotes, then we can maybe share them and hopefully give the audience a good laugh.
Hopefully. Yeah, I've got like disconnected, very short stories, and then I've got one sort of overarching story that involves a suspicion of mine, like that I only really formed in hindsight. So there's a speculative element to it, but I think it'll be fun.
Alright, you got me intrigued. What is this suspicion? If the suspicion is that are the British annoyed with you, possibly yes. I think
I think
we've now established that. That's not a
Yeah,
suspicion anymore.
I don't think that's a suspicion anymore. Yeah. No, what I suspect is that you are speaking with someone who is on some sort of watch list by the United States government.
Oh. Kind of inferred that or implied that before when the whole thing before you went on the jet program, you had to get was it like a proper FBI search or
Yeah.
background check you had to get done?
Yes, I had to do a background check for which I needed to get fingerprinted, but that's a standard part of the application procedure.
All right.
When I say that I suspect I'm on a watch list,
Like
it's because
Oh.
It's because of the numerous experiences I've had with airport security.
Oh no. Okay, right. We're going into the airport security stories. That's good. I've got quite a lot of them. That's good. What?
Nice.
How many times have you been caught with certain stuff? What is going on here?
Well, I've never been caught with anything, which I think is why it took me
Yet.
so long to put this together. Not yet.
What have they?
So
What have you been accused of?
I don't even know. So I this all begins with I think it all begins because again, this is me cobbling together information after the fact and just guessing. So there might be nothing at all to this. But I'll lay out the case as I currently understand it and you can make up your own mind.
All right.
Uh,
And
so
they
I
always make
was
their own
taking
judgments.
Yeah, I was taking a trip at one point, and I was short on a bag. I was like, oh, I just need like a small bag that I can take, and like when I'm making my way through the airport, right? So after I get through the security gate, I want to buy some aspirin or something because I had a headache, and I was like, all right, so I need an extra bag. And my dad, who was dropping me off, was like, okay, here, you can use this. And he reached over and handed me this old like camera bag, and I went through, start going through security, and they do all the regular security check stuff. You know, I take off my shoes, put everything in the box, go through the scanner, and I get through all that. I'm putting everything back in my pockets, and the person from the security counter is like, "So, is there anything I should know about what's in here?" And they have this bag that, like, this camera bag that my dad gave me, and I was like, "No." It's literally an empty bag that I just grabbed so I could have something for the flight. And they were like, okay. And they take this thing and they start like, they do a thorough search of the bag and they like, I don't know what the word, they like pull out some wipes or something. Like they're like gathering evidence and they're like
Oh,
definitely,
like the
they're
chemical
treating it.
tests and stuff. Right, right, right.
Yeah. They're treating it like there was like gunpowder residue or something.
Oh.
And I don't know what. Maybe there was some part of my dad's camera that leaked, and it was really suspicious. I don't know, but
Ah, right. Oh, God.
yep,
Oh, no.
they didn't find anything, so they let me go. But ever since, like whenever I go through the like pre-screening procedure to get through an airport security line, like my picture comes back with the X over it. That means I have to go through the double check process, and uh, and I've been like, so again, I think I'm on this list, and I kept having these experiences. So there was this one time where one of my first times when I was flying, like I would go from the United States to Japan, and then I'd go visit my friend in Canada, and then fly back home to the United States. And a lot of the times I would do this using Canadian Airlines because it's just easier to do the trip that way based on where I live.
Mm.
And uh, I remember I had this one guy who was at the security line in Canada where I was going through Canadian customs. And he looked at all my information and he was like, okay, so why are you coming to Canada? And I was like, oh, I'm visiting a friend of mine. We met on I didn't actually say this, which is an important part of the story, but the reason I was going to visit my friend was we met on the JET program. And he lives close enough to me in Canada that it makes sense for me to do this sort of triangle trip and see him on my way home. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm visiting friends. He was like, okay, then why did you go to Japan? And I was like, oh well, I was visiting friends. And he was like, you've just got friends all over the world.
Oh, how
And
dare
he said,
you, internationalist. Outrageous.
I know. He said it in that exact sort of accusatory tone. And I was like, yes. Like I was very confused. And then he was like, how did you meet? And I was like, oh, we all used to work on the JET program. It's the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. We all like we taught English in Japan together. He was like, oh, okay. And he like let me go. But I think that initial suspicion had to have come from the fact that I was on a watch list, right? Like it was like you've been flagged. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, that was a weird interaction. Lots of people have friends all over the world.
Or maybe not. Maybe you're the only one.
Maybe. It's very suspicious. And then I remember there was another airport that I was in Japan where I had already been through the security line. And it was one of those things where, again, like, you know, it's like, okay, we can't pre-screen you. You're going to have to go through the full rigmarole of going through. And so I did that. And they came up to me. Like, someone from security came up to me, and they were very nice. They were like, "Hi, we just like to ask you how your trip to Japan was today," or not today, but like
This time, right?
over the course of the time that I was there, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
was like, "Oh, it was great." And I told them all about my vacation. And I start thinking, "Why do they care about my 2 week like pleasure vacation in Japan? Like they're asking me, they came up specifically to see me after I went through the gate. What's going on?" And I look over and I see like someone's it like they very circumspectly like separated me from my bag and someone's going through it and I'm just like, "Okay, well I've got nothing to hide, so this is annoying, but I fine." And we just had this conversation about how I had a great trip to Japan and I saw Himeji Castle and it was an amazing experience. And they just got to deal with the fact that I'm just a regular tourist. And it's just like that. Those two are the real standouts. But it's also just like a repeated pattern where it's like, okay, sorry, you can't get pre-screened. You have to go through this other line and possibly be in danger of missing a connection, right? Because it takes extra time to go through the full security procedure every single time when you're entering and exiting a country. And it was just crazy. I was like, well, and then looking back, I was like, I never had any of these problems until the point where they were like, is there anything in this bag I should be concerned about, right? That I started with. And I was like, after that point, I suddenly got rejected from all these screenings and had to justify my existence in these different places and why I have friends all over the world. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen the next time I go to Japan because I haven't been traveling outside the US in like 5 years or no, 6 years now because it's pre-pandemic was the last trip I made outside the United States. And I don't know, maybe they're going to think, "Oh, the sleeper's been reactivated."
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Oh, look, right, right. We're back in action. He's been dormant all this time. He's out
Yeah,
of hiatus, ready to do whatever devious deeds
that's
you've got
right.
lined up. Or maybe you're gonna be off the watch list. Maybe they're like, ah, well, he's been on it for 10 years. We don't need him on it anymore. He's clearly no threat to society.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping happens, but you never know.
You have to tell us. You have to come back onto the podcast and tell us if you've had any other issues through security.
Yeah.
Oh dear. That's it. I mean, yeah. I've heard. I've not personally. And again, I will not name or I will try to somewhat hide the identity of these people. But I know of people who have had a couple of unfortunate incidents through security where uh, they found more than nothing.
Mm.
Not that the people were intending to be criminal or anything.
Hmm.
The one that I found particularly funny was there was a tradition at our uni where I did some of my studies where we'd have Cake Friday
Hmm.
when we would just all meet and have cake, right? Very innocent. And
Yep.
one of the people then the following, I don't know, let's say maybe the next weekend or the following week or whatever, or maybe the same day, had to take a flight. Um, and did not realize until they went through the security that the very sharp cake knife was still in their bag.
Oh.
And obviously, cue them pulling it out and going, and what do you think you're doing with this? And, and then obviously then once the explanation came out they could probably see the cake crumbs still caked onto it. They're like,
Oh, that's
okay,
funny.
that's okay, right, just chuck the knife away, it's fine. um, we did also have one which was quite funny where somebody I knew got stopped for having like antique bullets in their bag because they are like a sort of type of antique collector.
Hmm.
But the funny thing was, they got caught at one airport, but they'd already flown once that day. They just going through the
Oh.
connecting airport just because they had to change terminal. They
Yep.
had to. I'm not saying what airports it is, just so then people, just in case, right? But
Hmm.
because they did the connecting flight, but it was between different terminals. They
Hmm.
had to go through the security line again,
Yep.
and it's only on the second airport they got caught. Caught, I say
Oh
caught.
man.
Like they got picked up for it, and they weren't intending
Hmm.
like they weren't live or anything, but they literally had to get I think like potentially like the bomb squad in just to double check that these bullets weren't live. Obviously,
Wow.
I mean, yeah. So just mental. So yeah. I've fortunately not had anything. I've been pretty lucky. I don't think I'm on a watch list. I mean, Q and I'll be on a watch list now just by saying that.
Mhm.
They're thinking, oh, he's gonna get cocky. My big issue with airport security is normally, especially when I've had the bagpipes with me.
Ah.
They have been a bit of a source of entertainment, but also bemusement. Um,
Hmm.
Especially depending on where I'm flying from. I think it's getting. I think I don't know. I was going to say it was better now than in the past, but the thing is, I think now the world is just at a much sort of tenser time that maybe people and
Yeah.
airport security is just hell on earth at the best of times.
Hmm.
And I don't know what it's like, but a lot of the people who work there are just grumpy
Hmm.
bastards, basically. But I'm not surprised. You have to deal with the public all day, and the public are the
Yeah.
worst ever, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people not
Just and
cooperating with
not
you.
not just the public, people who are already irate from in being in the middle of traveling, which is, that's stressful enough,
Right.
and not wanting to be challenged on anything, right? Because they just want to go through and they're under time pressure because they got to get where they're trying to go, and yeah,
Mm.
it's just got to be a nightmare. I always try and be as polite and like happy and helpful as possible when I'm traveling because I feel like literally everyone else is going to be stressed out and I just want to make their lives as easy as possible.
Hmm.
I don't always succeed, but that's my policy. Like whenever I'm traveling, it's like time for 24 hours of me being happy all the time.
At least externally, anyway.
It's an act, exactly. It's an act of will. It's like I don't care how frustrated I am. I'm gonna try and be happy and helpful this whole time, and to make success. But still,
So, I can't remember the first time I took the pipes on a plane was only a domestic flight, so it was a lot more chill.
hmm
And I can't remember now. I don't. Thing is, so that one I don't really remember the flight or the whole flight experience very well because it was actually flying back down to England for my granny's funeral. So my whole mind was on that and actually playing the pipes at the funeral and not actually thinking of. The whole memory of me checking it or not checking in the bagpipes because I took them as hand luggage.
hmm
Um, because I've heard some nasty stories of people putting bagpipes into the hold and then cases get
mm.
smashed, and also because of the temperature difference inside the cabin
Yeah.
compartment, it really messes up with the wood and stuff. So yeah, you want to keep it in the cabin if you can. So I don't
hmm
remember much about that. The only thing I remember is we took the bagpipes apart and put them inside like a little, because the bagpipe case is too big for the overhead
hmm
um, compartment. Obviously, this was back in the time. This was when was this? This was late 2000s. So
Okay.
there was as much hand luggage, at least in Europe anyway. There wasn't as much hand luggage as there was back then because the whole way that budget airlines operated back then, in terms of charging loads extra for cases for the hold and stuff, was not as prevalent.
hmm
Um, so because of that, people still put loads of stuff into the hold, and there wasn't so much overhead sort of hand luggage as there is now. I would never do
hmm
this now, but we're able to take the hold all, and it was you could then squish it, but the bagpipes were safe inside. We had like bubble wrap all around it. And
hmm
because only a domestic flight, it wasn't that busy. We were able to tell people there are bagpipes, don't chuck heavy stuff on top of it and whatever. It was fine. But then when I took them out to Spain more recent, I've got them actually sitting behind me right now while we're talking, because I was
hmm
played at my wedding, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it. In terms, I didn't want to put them in the hold because if something
hmm
happened, I'd be really gutted about it. And then I wanted to have the case. I didn't want to do this everywhere. I collapse them, and then because those overhead racks get really squashed, and if someone just picks it up, they won't know what's in it. So
hmm
I just took the decision to buy an extra seat. My wallet was not happy with me, but it was
Wow.
the right
Yeah.
decision, and I could just sit there with my bagpipe case on the seat between me and my wife, just like the little child.
hmm
I just was looking out the window, and I strapped the seat, I put the seatbelt round it and everything. So yeah,
That's
we had a
funny.
bit of a joke out of it, but yeah. But I think it was then funny when the bemusement, because we flew from England and not from Scotland. So there's like
hmm
bemusement because the person might not have ever seen a bagpipe, or at least not in this context. They might have seen it in videos or maybe in the streets. But in
Hmm.
England, there aren't many bagpipes. It's only when you go like Highland festivals and things you might have them. But some
Hmm.
person who's lived in Manchester their whole life or whatever might not have ever seen one, at least in this context. And it's just the way I opened it and went. I went straight up to them before I took off all my shoes and stuff. I opened it and went, "These are bagpipes. What do you want me to
Hmm.
do with them?" And I was really hoping they would just look and say, "You can leave them inside the bag." But they're like, "No, you have to take it onto the tray." I was like, "Oh, damn it!" So right, off it went. But I had it all wrapped up in bubble wrap because I didn't want loose bits going everywhere because you're just asking for trouble.
Hmm.
So that was okay. I've not had that was fine. The one which I found more interesting was the what we call the chanter. So when you start learning the bagpipes, before you learn the bagpipes, normally it depends on how the teacher does it, but I learned a thing called the chanter. So the chanter is only, you don't have to worry about the bag bit. You don't have to worry about
Hmm.
all the drones that sit on your shoulder. You've only got, it's almost like a recorder. Think of it that way. But
Okay.
the notes are adapted to be for bagpipes because it's a slightly different
Hmm.
scale and whatever. So there's that. But then there's also an electronic version, which is much better because you don't have to blow and you can just play without having to think about breathing. So I've
Hmm.
taken my electronic bagpipe on different flights. I took one when I went to an exchange out in Germany because I just took it just to show my host family. But then when I was flying back, the Germans looked at it in just bewilderment, and I said, "Oh, it's an instrument." And I told them in German, "Oh, it's this," and they were like, "All right, prove it then, play it." So then cue me playing Scotland the Brave in the middle of Munich Airport or wherever it was we were flying from. I forgot that memory only because the teacher who I went on the exchange with, I know the family, he actually brought it up when I saw him quite recently. I was like, "Oh yeah, that happened, that's right." But then the more recent time, I went through Edinburgh Airport with it. And you think, well, come on, it's Scotland. They'd be a little bit more sort of switched on about what it is. But the problem is, right, when you look at it, it's just got this box at the top, and it's
Hmm.
just then got the almost like the stick with the notes that you hold
Hmm.
below it. Um, so when you look at it, there's nothing that says bagpipe on it, right?
Hmm.
So you could easily not realize what it is, and it has the word drones written on it.
Oh no.
So there was a point where I had it in my ruck. I can't remember if I had it in my rucksack or I had it loose. I probably had it loose in the tray. I can't remember, but I saw it. It was, and I know, like you can just predict it. I saw my rucksack came down, it was fine. My shoes came down, and then I saw the tray with the chanter in, and it got diverted
Mm.
behind, so I couldn't pick it up, and they had to deal with it. And I just looked at my wife and went, "I'll be 5 minutes. They want to talk to me about the chanter, right?" So off I went, and this lovely girl just saw me, and she was like, "Is this a remote control for a drone?"
Hmm.
I was like, "No,"
Yeah.
because obviously incredulous. I didn't realize they didn't know what it was. And I was like, "No, it's an electronic bagpipe." And they kind of looked at me like they couldn't compute what I just said to them.
Hmm.
And I said, because I've done it before, I said, "If you want, I can play it for you.
Hmm.
If you don't want to, you don't think it's a bomb or something, I can prove it to you. It's an electrical instrument." And they were like, "No, that's fine." I was like, "Okay, fine."
Well, at least you didn't have to play it that
No,
time.
here's the thing. I was disappointed I didn't have to play it.
Oh well.
Because I'd
There you
mentally
go.
prepared myself, I'm going to play for them. And they were like, "No, we don't want you to play." I was like, "Oh, well, fuck you then. I'm not going to play for you then. How dare you reject your national instrument?"
Oh, that's funny.
So I was kind of gutted about that, but it's okay. So
Yeah.
I've got it sitting next to me as we speak as well. Because again, that's another thing that's come up on the Twitch streams. I've made it like a
Hmm.
reward for my viewers. They can make me play the chanter if they accumulate enough points. And the problem is, I think I've set the price too low because I keep doing it in every stream. But it's good fun because I'm getting back into it, so it's nice.
Nice.
So yeah, the chanter's definitely had some things. Normally, I'm pretty good. I don't get caught in terms of going through the scanner. Like I don't know how they do it in the States, but in Europe, there's like the initial scanner is almost like the arch that you have to walk under.
Hmm. Hmm.
I normally don't get caught at that. My wife, for some reason, always does. I'm not quite sure why. But I'm normally pretty. I think also because I take a lot of precaution and I take off everything, not literally everything. Don't worry, I'm not going nude through it. But you know, I'm very good, and I'll take off the belt. I'll clear out all my pockets. I take off my shoes. Like there is literally nothing on me that
Hmm.
could trigger it. But I did
Right.
actually the most recent flight which we took to come back. I did back to Spain. I did actually trigger it. I was like, oh,
Hmm.
damn it, really? Okay, fine, whatever. So then what they do now, depending on the airport, I went through the arch, that triggered. So then I had to go into the one which is like the whole body scanner,
Yep.
and you have to put your right, you almost start like a Star Angel, right?
Hmm.
And,
Yep.
and the reason why this came up about the podcast it was after this incident that I said, right, we have to talk about this because I thought it'd be quite funny. So I did the whole body scan, and they said, right, come over here. So I left the scanner and I stood there. They said, wait here for a moment. I was like, okay. And I saw them all start preparing um, the swabs and like this chemical tester where they're gonna literally rub all over my
Hmm.
body with this. I don't even know what it was. It's not even the sensor because it's like an electrochemical, or I don't know what sort of, some sort of chemical strip
Hmm.
inside that they then take out and they analyze afterwards. But anyway, while they were setting up all this, I realized that beside me was the screen of my scan, right? And I
Oh.
could see the scan, right? And there was a almost like kind of like a silhouette of me going through the
Hmm.
scan. Everything is absolutely perfect. Nothing, no splodges, nothing, except a massive exclamation mark on my crotch. And I'm just gonna say, even though the guy with like the chemical swabber thing, even though he did it all over my body, he put a lot of attention around that area.
Oh boy.
I don't know why you thought. I was like, am I gonna have to do a strip search here? Like literally, there's nothing there, mate.
Ugh.
um, and then they were like, okay, fine, you can go. So I don't know what on earth got picked up there, by the way. But it's only that as soon as we left, I got my phone out. And my wife was like, what are you doing? He's like, I need to send a message to a rook, right? We have to talk about this on the podcast. Because I've never
Oh,
had
that's
it
wild.
that sort of blatant. In just terms of there was like the red splodge right around my crotch with this exclamation mark. I was like, oh god, what on earth have they found?
Oh boy.
There's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing to hide
No.
anyway. But oh man, um, I could never even contemplate sneaking something through. I'm just way too honest, and I would just crack under any sort of pressure. Do you have anything in the bag? Yes, yes, yes. I'll tell you everything. Right?
Hmm.
I wouldn't be able to. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of you always hear the stories. It was kind of funny with the I proposed to my wife over here, and she said to
Hmm.
me after I proposed around Easter time, and she said to me afterwards, "Oh, I mean, she was overjoyed, obviously, right? She couldn't complain
Hmm.
after all those years, right? She was no room to complain, but she said, I thought you were going to propose in the summer in the UK, and I did contemplate that, but partly I wouldn't be able to withstand 3 more months of nagging on
Hmm.
the topic. But also, I was really worried about taking the ring through security in terms of
Oh,
do I
yep.
put it in the hold, but what if we lose it? And then if I
Hmm.
turn it into my hand luggage, am I going to have a situation in the airport when, there'll be people racing into the security room with all the machine guns and whatever going, everyone down on the floor, there's a terrorist. And I'll just be like, no, it's not. It's nothing bad. Will you marry me? Right? I'll have to get the ring out and show her in front of everybody, right? So I thought, no, let's just play it safe.
Yep.
And
It
not.
would be a memorable proposal.
It would be. It would be. But after my wife specifically told me, under no circumstances can it be a very public engagement, I think that would very much count as a public
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, it
Obviously,
definitely would.
uh, unforced or whatever the phrase would be. It'd be forced upon me. It wasn't intentional, but still, just to make sure that there's no
Hmm.
rings. You do hear stories about that.
Yeah.
You
Oh, I
definitely.
mean, I'm the same way, by the way. Like, I get nervous taking shampoo through the thing, right? They've got the tiny little bottles that you can like make sure are within the liquid allowance.
Oh
And
man, what a faff.
I'm always like super conscious of that because I like I like fountain pens, and you when you travel with those, you've got a certain amount of ink that you've got allotted, and it's like, okay, well, how much ink do I have? How much am I gonna have to worry about shampoo? How much am I gonna worry about soap? Like I can buy stuff at the time, and like you don't necessarily need to bring like soap or shampoo with you. But in my case, because I do a lot of those long haul flights where it's like, okay, you're just gonna be like on a plane or in airports for the next 24 hours. It's nice to be able to go into a bathroom and be like, okay, I'm just gonna freshen up a bit. So
Right.
it's like I want to make sure that I've got my like liquids and gels and everything under control. And just I go through that so many times so that I don't get caught out.
And that's something I didn't appreciate. I've only done one long haul flight, but it's probably one of the longest you could ever do. I flew from Edinburgh to Doha in
Okay.
Qatar, and then from
Oh,
Qatar to Auckland. So,
wow.
so to put it in perspective, Edinburgh to Doha is 8 hours more or less.
Hmm.
That at that point, that was the longest flight I'd ever been on. But
Yep.
then Doha to Auckland is 18 hours.
Wow.
And then I did it back again. Only a few days later.
Mm.
I was in New Zealand for, I want to say, I think about 8 days.
Oh,
I
okay.
think.
Better than the time I flew to Japan for the weekend.
Oh man, that sounds
That was
brutal.
that was a mistake.
Yeah, I could tell you that without even hearing the rest of the story. I mean, oh man,
Yeah.
it'd be even worse if you tried to sort of what's the phrase? Acclimatize to
Yeah.
Japanese timetable. That'd be even worse. The jet lag would have been brutal.
Yeah. That's what made it terrible. I was a zombie for like the next week.
Crap. Yeah, you're never doing that again.
No. No, yeah. I mean, it's not actually that involved of a story. It's just I was finding my feet as a translator, and I knew someone who was like, "Hey, I'm going to be putting together this thing where I'm trying to like collect all these people and leverage the power of networking and get these translator networks up and running." And I thought, "Oh, this is cool. This could be helpful for my career." And he was like, "A great way to like get involved with these networking events is to like volunteer translate." At different gaming events, and a big one is Bit Summit, which is this like indie gaming like celebration that happens in Kyoto. And it was like, I'll put you on the list. And I was like, okay, like I'll give it a try. And I looked at how it was going to happen, and I was like, okay, so it's going to be taking place over this weekend. I can fly in, fly out, and it shouldn't be a problem. And it was a problem. It was like I didn't like it wasn't even my first time going to and from Japan. I knew the jet lag was going to be an issue, but I was just like, I'll deal with it, and I did not deal with it very well.
Oh, that,
Oh man.
that sounds
The one thing that
grim.
I the one thing that I was proud of was and this has happened to like several times since I've gone back to Japan, is that because of the timing, it happened in the summer. And at that particular point, I was doing a lot of hiking. And I tend to avoid hiking in the summer if I can help it. But at the time, I was just like, this is a good time to go. So I'm going to go to this mountain, especially if it's a tall mountain. It gets colder towards the top anyway. So summer's not a bad time. So I was doing a lot of hiking. And so I remember talking with people like after the event. And so, like, one part of the experience that everyone else had that I didn't was they were all tired of being on their feet for like 10, 12 hours at a time. And I was like, oh, that part I can do no problem. I was walking to the venue, walking around the venue, and walking back home, like to my home, not home, to my hotel.
Hmm.
Uh, for a total, I think like 14 hours, just walking around on my feet, and I was just like, yeah, this is normal.
But just trying to stay
So
awake was the other problem.
yeah, that was like that part of it was like, oh, like I'm in shape, that's nice, and the other part of it was, oh man, I just want to die.
You just be in an eternal state of obliviousness in terms of what time it is, what day it is, where you are. It's mental.
Yeah, yeah, and it was definitely like after that trip, I was like, it wasn't worth it. It did
Mm.
not lead to any noticeable opportunities. Like, if maybe if I was living in Japan, it would make more sense as a trip. But coming like the 14-hour flights, which admittedly that's not as far as you went to Auckland, but still, the back to back over the course of 3 days, that was not worth it. I was like, nope, much too much of an investment.
No, you did it once and then you learn.
Exactly.
But something I did appreciate how much I would stink after 26 hours on a plane. Also, my
Mm,
journey was even longer than the 26 hours ish, a little bit
yeah.
over, as well on a plane, because I had an 8-hour layover in Doha.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say, yeah, you had to factor in the layovers. That's another lesson I learned the hard way, where it was like, oh, I'll just take this cheap flight that has an 18-hour layover, and it's like, that's a bad idea.
why do you do that? Well, I guess it depends on where you go, because I know with Doha, you can get like a special visa that you can leave the airport temporarily and then go back.
hmm
I decided not to get it because I thought, well, an 8-hour layover, I don't need it. If it's going to be an 18-hour thing, then I could maybe justify going and find a nice hotel or something, right?
Right,
Because if
and
I
that's what I was thinking. That's what I was like, oh, I'll stay at a hotel, and it was like, yeah, no, it like when you factor in all the savings from the flight and then put in a hotel that you actually want to stay at, like you're not saving any money versus the more direct flight. So what are you doing?
mm,
That's another lesson I had to learn. I was like, okay.
I think I could have had a shorter connection, but I'm very. I always err on the side of caution, and I never want to
hmm
risk. I've seen way too many people running through airports trying to catch connecting flights, and I
Oh
think
yeah,
as much as I hate waiting around, I'd rather not stress. So
yeah.
it was actually like Doha Airport is just massive anyway, so I wasn't really bothered. I
hmm
didn't sleep though because again I don't want someone walking off with my luggage or anything. So, and that's not a thing about Doha, by the way. I'd be like that in the UK or Spain. I'd be anywhere.
hmm
I'd be the same. So I didn't sleep during those 8 hours. So I slept
hmm
during mostly through the flight, the leg between Doha and Auckland. Um,
Yep.
there's this weird state. I mean, 18 hours on a plane. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, that sounds like really long." It's like, well, it is, but also you get food given to you, right, on a
hmm
tray. You've got this
Yep.
screen in front of you of films you can watch. You've got, I mean, the back. I mean, I've got an iPod. That shows how old I am, right?
hmm
Um, got an iPod with all the like 3 days worth of music. You can read. You can sleep. It's fine. I mean,
hmm
relatively speaking. I mean, I thought it was fine. It wasn't. I didn't. At no point did I ever, think this was a horrific experience. The only thing was I didn't realize how much I'd stink after 26. I do know because I know my body. I
Yeah.
need regular showers. I need to. It was just when I was arriving into Auckland. Well, a couple of hours before arriving, I thought, "Whew,
Yeah.
you're not putting on a good impression here for. You're not representing Scotland very well. You better go and freshen up a little bit, son."
Yeah, it's something it's easy to not think about. I think that's another thing I probably learned from my study abroad experience, right? Which that would have been the first time I was on the flight over to Japan, and it was like I was getting ready for that flight. I was like, oh, I'm going to study kanji the whole time, and I'm going to do all this stuff, and I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't know they were going to turn the lights off in the expectation that everyone was going to go to sleep.
Ah, of course. Yeah.
And I was like,
All
oh,
the mood
well,
lighting. Yeah.
so much for studying kanji,
Mm, yeah, they.
and yeah, you land and it's like, okay, I stink. What am I gonna do about that?
I'm
Yeah. Uh,
trying to.
it's just so many little things that you don't really think of when you're traveling, and it all like in my case anyway, it all hit me at once, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna be better prepared the next time I do this.
It was nice because it was whole like this grand adventure. I'd never been outside of Europe, so it was really cool. And I remember the first flight to Doha. It was on Qatar Airways, and I flew like in a brand new, like literally, I can't even like state brand new, like 3-month-old Airbus, and
Nice.
and it was just it's like this I could live with because I'm so used to budget European airlines. I was like, I could get.
hmm
I mean, the seat was actually. I wasn't touching the sides of the seat already. I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much space. It was a very quiet flight as well. There were. I mean, there were people, but I had the row to myself, and it was really
Oh,
nice.
oh.
But the flight from Doha to Auckland was rammed. There wasn't a
Hmm.
spare seat anywhere. It was mental.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, extra seats are such a lifesaver. I can't sleep on an airplane. Like, and the other thing that I learned when I was trying to study kanji is even when there was light, I get like car sick super easy. I can't look down. And
Ah.
there are a lot of people who, even though they get car sick, they don't get air sick. And so I was thinking, it probably won't be a problem. And I got on the plane and I found out, nope, it's a problem. If I look down for too long, even though I'm on an airplane, right? The theory that it's the motion out of the corner of your eye that you can't reconcile that makes you motion sick. I was like, I don't know what it is, but on an airplane with all the windows closed, if I look down for more than half an hour, I start to feel sick. Uh,
Oh.
Yeah. So basically, all I do is like try and keep myself on a schedule. Try to sleep as best I can. I count it as a victory if I can get 4 hours of sleep on a 14-hour flight.
Hmm.
And that just leaves a whole lot of time where it doesn't matter what I do, I'm just feeling the pain of being on a long flight. And both of my best experiences traveling to or from Japan were when I was able to lie down. And
Mm.
in one case, it was actually because I made myself airsick, and they came over and they gave me some stuff for my stomach, and I took that and instantly was sick again. And they were like, okay, we need a doctor. They did the whole thing, and the doctor came over and was like, this person just needs to lie down. And so they like cordoned off the one of the bathroom sections for me. I'm sure this may be very popular on the flight. Uh, and like you could still get to the bathroom, but I was a huge nuisance in your way. But it allowed me to lie flat.
Hmm.
And once that happened, like I went to sleep, and the next thing I knew, they were descending, and they were like, "You have to go sit down again." And I was like, "This was an amazing experience." Like I don't like being sick, but the time warp of just being able to go to sleep and then wake up and be in Japan, that was amazing. And the only other time I was able to accomplish it was when I like actually bought an upgrade to business class, and they had
Ooh.
this
Look
yeah,
at
they had
you.
this super fancy seat that
Hmm.
you hit the right button and the whole thing goes flat.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, this is a game changer." No wonder everyone likes to fly this way. And it's like 10 times as expensive if you're just buying a ticket and not getting an upgrade.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, that was a whole experience. Like flying business class on a long haul flight, that was nice.
It's a little bit of
They
a
came over.
dream. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to do it, but that'd be a dream of mine. Just to experience at least business
Yeah.
class once. I've watched people on YouTube reviewing it, and
Hmm.
I think even the worst business class for me would just be a dream. Just the
Yeah.
the game changing experience of just being able you could lie flat. You have a nice little like your little cubby hole
Hmm.
with the walls and everything, and that would just be
Yeah.
game
They came
changing.
over. They came over and they were like, "Here's the flight plan we'll be following today." I was like, "Oh, yes. Interesting." They were like, "Here, would you like something to drink?" And I thought they were handing me orange juice, and I realized it was champagne, and I was like, "Oh, uh, maybe you don't have that, but give me some orange because I don't drink. Give me some orange juice." And I'm sure they were happy with that because that was, as far as they're concerned, a bargain.
Right, exactly. You're saving them money.
Yeah. But I was just like, wow. And they came over, like they give you trays in the regular class, but they in the business class they give you like actual silverware
Yeah.
with a cloth napkin. I was like, this is incredible. And I
So
could sleep. It was the teleport. Like when I wasn't teleporting, I was in perfect comfort. So it was amazing. And I was like, wow. Like that would like you say, that had been like a long-term dream of mine that like I got it to happen once over the course of, I don't know, 10 years of flying back and forth between the US and Japan, and it was like, yeah, that was worth having that one experience. That was incredible.
interesting about the sleep thing. I find I sleep very easily. Um,
Oh, I wish.
Sometimes
I
I
wish.
can't. If it depends. If it's on a train and if the train is quite stuffy, then I find it quite hard to sleep.
Hmm.
Um, but oh yeah, I mean, if I'm a passenger in a car, I'm out. Depending on what's happened during the day, but a lot of the time I'm out like a light. I'm like a baby. The
Mm-hmm.
motion, even though I've said it before, maybe on stream or in the podcast, I'm a horrible passenger. Not a terrible,
Mm-hmm.
like not a hellish passenger, but just I get nervous about what other drivers are doing and the like.
Oh.
But at the same time, the motion will just send me to sleep
Mm-hmm.
very, very easily. And it's almost embarrassing to this point where I have to really work to stay awake. I'm yawning
There
because
you
I'm
go.
thinking about tiring. I'm thinking about sleep now. But
Yep.
I have to really work hard to stay awake when I'm in the car. Obviously, if
Mm.
I'm driving, that's a different story. I've not
Mm-hmm.
had it yet because I'm concentrating on the road. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm just not, if I'm a passive, and part of like the passive experience of driving as a passenger, if I don't try to stay awake, I just fall asleep very easily. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had a flight. I was on a flight once between can't remember where we took off. If somewhere in England, and we went to Amsterdam,
Okay.
and I fell asleep as we were taking off, and I woke up as we landed. Literally the second we
Hmm.
landed, I was like, "Oh, that flight was quick."
Yeah. Oh, that's my favorite. Like I said, that's the best.
Right,
When you can just go to sleep and wake up and you're there.
right.
That's the best.
And that's the thing. During that 18-hour leg between, I think between Edinburgh and Doha, I don't think I slept because I was just so excited. I was giddy, like, "Oh my god, I'm on an 8-hour plane, 8-hour flight. This is so exciting." And I'm on a really nice Airbus. But I can sleep on planes. I mean, if I was maybe in the middle seat, then that might, depending on who's either side of me, it might be a bit uncomfortable. But I always
Hmm.
try to get aisle seats, or if it's a window seat,
Oh yeah.
depending on the situation. Um, and I was able to fall asleep
Hmm.
both ways. So I think that's the thing. An 18-hour flight is definitely not as bad if you're able to sleep through it. If you cannot sleep just because of
Yeah.
the environment or whatever. Um, I get kind of annoyed with myself a lot. I find I can sleep anywhere apart from bed, which is really frustrating. The time I need to
Mm.
sleep is in bed, and I really struggle to sleep sometimes. Whereas then suddenly, put me into a moving car, okay, I'm out like a light. It's very, it's a very frustrating experience. But especially as a kid,
Yeah.
I slept very well in bed, which is very annoying. But
Hmm.
uh, yeah, it definitely makes the experience a lot more easier when you've got that. But I can't remember now. When I arrived in Auckland, it was a really silly hour. It might have been something like 4 a.m. that I landed, or maybe something like 2 or 3 a.m. New Zealand time that I
Hmm.
landed, more or less. So by the time you get your luggage, go through security, blah blah blah. I made it into like the center of Auckland about 4:30 in the morning. And I was thinking, well, now what? Right,
Mm.
because I was waiting for the accommodation to open. But I did take advantage of the day because I had a couple of spare days until the conference I was going to was starting, so I was able to take advantage. And I was like, no, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to take full advantage of the day. So I did try and adapt to New Zealand time quite quickly, but I still had horrible jet lag. I'd wake up randomly in the middle of the
Hmm.
night, and then I'd be falling asleep once I got back to the hotel after the conference at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. Um,
Yeah.
so the jet lag was still pretty rough, but I mean it was an 18-hour trip. You know, it's
Hmm.
is it 12 hours between? Yeah, I think it's 12 hours between, or 13 hours between Auckland and the UK or Spain, depending on where you're counting from. So, um,
Hmm.
the funny thing in terms of the story, in terms of going to New Zealand, was when. I mean, this bit's not very funny, but I'm saying it now because it's just hindsight. But I was in Edinburgh Airport, ready to fly, and I don't get panic attacks. It's not something that I get, but I think I got what you might diagnose as a panic attack. And I was
Oh.
really because I suddenly realized when I was queuing or getting ready to go to the gate that I didn't have a visa.
Oh wow.
Um, and because I've always flown within Europe, and in Europe you don't need visas most of the time, right? And I've always been
Mm.
inside Schengen, I'm always used to that. So, and I did have what you maybe experience like as a panic attack. I was just freaking out in the airport. Oh my god! It wasn't just the fact that the whole idea of maybe I might get sent back immediately, but it's also because of the way I was doing it. I was attending a conference, and the money that basically paid for my flight and everything was paid by donations or like stipends from organizations which were related to my field. So it wasn't
Mm.
my own money. If something happened, I would have basically, spaffed. I don't know how much. I mean, you're looking at maybe like 2 grand, I think. In terms of
Wow.
the flight, I mean, the flights alone, I think, were about £800 or £900, and then once you got accommodation thrown in for 8 or 9 days, whatever it was, right? You're looking at about at least £1,500,
Mm.
$1,500 more or less, at least, of not my own money. Um,
Yeah.
and I was just like, oh my god, if I get sent back, how am I going to explain all that? I was freaking out so much, and then but I knew I didn't need a visa. This is the stupid thing. I knew I didn't need a visa, but in that moment, my brain just
Hmm.
forgot all logic. And the reason why everyone's listening, going, "What do you mean you don't need a visa to go to New Zealand?" The reason why is because, at least with some European countries, but at least with the UK, New Zealand had, well, at least then did, maybe it doesn't anymore, but it has like a special agreement, and you can
Hmm.
go to New Zealand for I think 6 months without needing a visa,
Yeah.
as long as you're not.
Japan has something.
As long as you're
Japan
not
has
working.
something similar with the United States.
Right. As long as you're not working. I think if you're not working, you're fine. If you're
Mm-hmm.
working, then you have to declare stuff and whatever. And I went onto the website for the conference, and I found it eventually at the gate, and I was calling my now wife, going, "Oh my god, I fucked up. This is awful." And she's like, "Calm down, it's fine." And I
Mm-hmm.
eventually found it on the conference website. There's a section about visa that said if you're visiting from the UK or whatever, if you're coming from any of these countries, you don't need a visa because you
Mm-hmm.
can justify, yeah, you're working, but you're not working because you're not earning money for it.
Right.
You can put it down to leisure. You're not actually earning money from coming to the country. So then eventually I was like, oh, okay, we're fine. But the reason why that kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about now is, as we were approaching Auckland, about
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe as we're in the descent phase, but we weren't at the point where it was critical and the cabin crew had to strap in or anything. We were
Right.
all given like a landing card. So when you
Mm-hmm.
do you have the same when you go to Japan and when you fly
Yes.
back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd never seen one of these before because obviously inside the Schengen zone you don't have this thing. You don't have to declare anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, at least at the very least you don't declare it on the flight. You don't have to fill in this form on the flight. If you have to
Mm-hmm.
declare something, you just declare it in the airport as you go through customs. But I've never been given a form, and the fact they'll say, "Do you have this? Are you taking that?" Because New Zealand is very, because it's almost like this isolated ecosystem. So you've got to be
Mm.
really careful. You can't take any food in at all. Not
Oh,
even like, I
wow.
know there's some in the even in the EU, some meats are banned from being taken
Mm-hmm.
across border, but you can't even take fruit and vegetables because they can't
Wow.
risk that one seed lands in the wrong place and then suddenly you get this invasive species, right? A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
obviously I knew what was in my stuff, so a lot of the questions was like no, 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 no. But then they asked like questions which are very ambiguous, like have you got mountain or like countryside based shoes? And I
Mm.
was like, well, yes, because I walk through the parks in Edinburgh with these shoes. Is that what you want? Like, I didn't know.
Mm.
It was a very
Yeah.
confusing sort of experience, and then when we got we got into Auckland, there was this really thorough sort of security. You give them the landing card and with all the stuff declared. I think I can't remember now, but I think I had to open my rucksack and show them some things. There was no food, and I asked them, "Are my shoes okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's fine." Blah blah blah, and all of that was really taken very seriously. But then when it actually came
Mm-hmm.
to like the passport control, I went into one of the like electronic gates. I just scanned it, and all it said on the screen was, "Do you know that you have to leave New Zealand within 6 months?"
Hmm.
And it was just a yes no question. I just said yes, and then the gate just swung open. And I was thinking,
Wow.
is anybody going to check that I've got an outbound flight? No? Alright, okay, I'm in
Wow.
New Zealand now then, apparently.
Oh, that's so funny.
There was like no I expected it was like
I've never been through a customs thing where they don't even have someone there.
well there are people there, but a lot of times if you've got like the electronic passports, they try to avoid it now. They don't want the human they only do the human stuff if the electronic gates are not working, or if you can't scan your passport for whatever reason, or if you've got,
Oh, wow.
or at least for the UK it'll be for non-EU nationals. So you would have to do it as a non-EU national
Right.
coming to the UK. You would have to go through and talk to the guy. Um,
Right.
but you know, in theory, myself, I don't have to talk to the guy. My Spanish wife wouldn't have to go and talk to anybody. Um, it was just I just
Wow.
found it because it's just the fact they had all this protocol about don't bring any fruit or vegetables or you could be banned and all this sort of thing, and then suddenly, oh yeah, just make sure you leave within 6 months. Have fun.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, that's really
I
funny.
did like this double take. I was like, really? Is that
I did
it?
something.
Is that the
I did
security?
something. Go ahead.
I was just say, is that the security? All right, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
fun. Thanks.
Yeah, I did something very similar the first time I went to Japan because they have it's probably not the same exact form. They didn't ask me about my shoes, but they had all that list of things. Are you bringing any fruits, nuts, blah blah blah, agricultural products like with you? And I had like some candy, and I was like, I don't know, does that candy count? And I clicked, I checked yes or whatever. And so they diverted me through the whole thing, right? Because they were like, oh, you checked yes, so you need to go through the like agricultural screening. And I went to this one room where like literally nobody else was, because I was the only person who apparently had this question. and they were like, "All right, let's open up your bag," and they see these like this like thing of just snacks, and they were like, "Oh, you're totally fine." Why did you fill out this form this way? And I was like, I don't know. It asked about food.
You always are on the side of caution, right?
Yeah,
I was the same. Yeah, because I didn't
yeah,
know. Because I didn't want to have. I'd rather have that situation than not declare it and then get told off afterwards. Be like, why did you declare this? Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a very similar experience, and they were like, "All right, you're good. Keep going." And then of course, thankfully, like because of that like extra process, by the time I got to the actual like passport customs things, the line has already been thinned out, and I was very quickly able to like get to a booth. So I was like, "Oh, it worked out." But now I know I don't have to check that box anymore.
Okay.
It's sort of funny. Like I've made the trip back and forth so many times now that I remember being like super anxious about that form the first time and like getting everything right, and then over time just realizing nobody cares. Nobody cares about those forms. They look at it, they're like, anything to declare? And I'm like, nope. And they're like, okay. And it's like, all right, well, as long as I know, like, I don't actually bring in anything like that, right? So
hmm
it's never an issue. But it's like, now I know, all right, well, I have nothing to declare, and I know like the ambiguity. A lot of the ambiguity's gone for me. Some of it, it's just I've been saying no for so long that if anyone does call me on it at this point, I'll be surprised. And
hmm
not that I'm actually breaking anything, right? It's the ambiguous ones that you worry about. It's like, do these snacks count as food that can't be brought into the country, right? And at this point, if I'm carrying something and there's like no like like it's a thing of wheat thins or something, just as a random example, it's like okay, yeah, there's no worry about them sprouting as an invasive species if they fall into the sidewalk or something, right? So I could just say no. Although I did get stopped short one time because I wanted to bring back. I have a friend of mine who really likes lemon flavored things, and I was like, "Oh, there's this great lemon flavored soda in Japan that I think you would enjoy." And so I was coming back with this lemon soda in my carry-on, and they were like, "Oh, you can't bring that. That's over the liquid allowance." And the funny thing is, remember how I talked about how careful I am about like the inks
Right.
and the shampoo and the soap and everything and my liquid allowances?
Not
I
the
was
lemon
super
soda.
careful about all that stuff, and I didn't even think about the lemon soda. I just threw it in the bag and was like, "It's gonna be fine." I was worried about it losing carbonation on the flight, and they were like, "Oh, you can't bring that." And as soon as they said it, I was like, "Of course I can't. What was I thinking?" I was like, "All right, I'll just unzip this thing here and put it in the cargo."
Oh dear. Yeah, it's such a faff because I remember situations where on like the exchange trips I used to do at school and family or the kid going over from Scotland would want to take whiskey over for the German family that they were staying with. But then instantly that raises loads of issues because you can't take it in your carry-on because it's a massive bottle.
Hmm.
So do you put it in your suitcase and then if it breaks, what? And just yes, I really hope there'll be a day where all of that restriction is not necessary because it's such a faff.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And the funny thing is, right, in my very the earliest days of my youth when my family would go on vacations and things, I'm just old enough to remember when that wasn't a problem.
Right.
Before the security sort of went haywire with 9/11 and everything. And it's just like, yeah, I remember a time when none of this was that big of a deal.
Right, was I don't. That's the thing because
Yeah.
you're a tad older than me. So when 9/11, I was 7 when that
Mm.
happened, and in my conscious memory, we'd never done an international trip.
Hmm.
I had been abroad. I had been to Germany, but I was a baby essentially. I was a toddler, so I don't remember.
Right.
So the all the flights I have any memory of taking is after 9/11.
Hmm.
And all of that, you know, security stuff. I actually don't know. Again, we're going off slightly off topic, but now I'm thinking about this as somebody who, as we've talked about, or I've mentioned before on the podcast, I have a slightly not I don't say morbid fascination. I have a fascination with plane crashes, but I realize out of context that sounds absolutely horrible. I mean, just
Yeah.
in terms of an interest in terms of pilot psychology and not that I'm an engineer, but like the engineering process and safety protocols and all this sort of thing. But before 9/11, there were a couple of really high-profile cases in the UK.
Hmm.
Um, So one of which was the Lockerbie bombing. I don't know if that's one that you have heard about. Um,
Unfortunately, no.
um,
My level of international knowledge is still fairly poor,
that's okay.
unfortunately.
Well, it was actually one. It was a flight between, I think it was London and New York that got
Oh,
hit.
wow.
It was a sad case. There was an explosion on the flight, and unfortunately the plane. It's called the Lockerbie bombing because actually the plane fell onto the village. Um,
Oh.
and that's in the southern part of Scotland. So there's a lot of memorials and things if you go there for it. But I can't remember when that happened. I've got a feeling, if I've got my timeline right, I think it was late 80s that happened.
Okay.
So I'm kind of interested now. I'm gonna try and research it. You know, in the UK, was security stepped up after Lockerbie, or was it only after 2001 or
Hmm.
9/11, as you would call it? Yeah, because yeah, 9/11. Sorry, now I've got the Spanish in my brain.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I don't know. Literally, no, I'm just. Oh my goodness! I've just seen a thing pop up on my phone about another plane. I was like, please don't be another plane crash. This year
Mm.
has been dreadful for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really bad.
Oh wait, what did I say? Did I say late 80s?
You did.
Oh, that was 88. Oh, that was a good guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember the like the discussion surrounding like the increase in airport security around 9/11 and how people would bring up that like back in the 70s there used to be hijackings all the time
mm,
and nobody cared. Like that none of those hijackings were enough to like increase security. It was like, "Oh, you're on this flight, you might get hijacked." Okay, and then what would happen is they would make some stopover somewhere and then they would, they would just go back and complete the flight. I'm making this sound probably a lot more flippant than it actually was, but that's sort of the tone that I remember being talked about when I was younger, and thinking, boy, I really like. I remember thinking as a kid, being like, "I airport security is already a pain in the neck. Are they really going to make it worse?" And yes, they did. And now I've had to deal with that for the vast majority of my life, and it's very frustrating.
right. I've not known any different. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's just
I
that
remember. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's more like the profile. It's not just a hijacking, right?
Hmm.
It's a hijacking where the plane is used as a weapon. So it's a very
Right.
different way. You know, it's a completely different scale of what
Right.
is capable, right? So I mean, I get it.
Yeah. Which is totally fair. Yeah, I remember one of the schemes at the time was like just make it so that the cockpit is completely separated from the passenger cabin.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, now like that's nice and secure for the pilots, but what's that going to do if there's an emergency, right? So,
Right. Or like
yeah.
the incident with the again another one. I don't want to make this a very morbid podcast, but like the German wings one.
Mm,
I don't know if you know about that one either.
no.
It's
No,
a
I was just making general sounds to show that this is something that I've inherited from Japanese, which is I'll just make noises to let you know that I'm listening. It's called aizuchi.
oh,
A lot
um,
of people they'll go on, they'll start talking about something to a Japanese person, and they'll be like, yes, yep, completely, yep, I understand. And they're not actually agreeing with you. They're just showing that they're listening. And so a lot of people will hear someone agree with them in Japanese vociferously the whole time they're talking, and then be like, I think that's a terrible idea, right? Or maybe not quite that extreme, but they actually disagree.
so you can't get a sense of what someone thinks until they actually open their mouth after you finish speaking. You can't get a
Right.
sense if they're on board. Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, it was just a case of it was a sad case, and I kind of connected with this one a little bit more because the time it happened, it was a flight between Barcelona and I want to say Dusseldorf. I think that's right, but I flown almost the exact same route when I was on my German exchange. I flew, I think, from it was Hanover. I flew from to Barcelona to visit my wife, and then flew back again. So I knew this route because I'd done it
Hmm.
a couple of times, and it was a case of unfortunately the pilot um, locked the other pilot out of the cockpit, and
Uh,
deliberately downed the plane. Um, and then there's a
wow.
whole investigation about the pilot's mental state and all this, and then that was then the whole thing about, well, okay, this is all fair and well that you can make these cockpits which are impenetrable from the outside, but what happens if the person in the cockpit is the problem? So that's
Right.
where the whole I don't know if they're following this, but at least in Europe, after this event, there was a rule. Again, I don't know if it still exists, but for some time after, where if a pilot wanted to leave the cockpit, then one of the cabin crew would have to go into the cockpit and
Hmm.
almost sit, not necessarily sit in the jump seat, but they had to be in the cockpit. So it's the pilot alone, because the pilot has ways that they can actually lock themselves completely inside the cockpit, and you
Mm-hmm.
cannot enter with the code from the outside. Because there is an emergency code that pilots know to get in, but you can actually
Mm-hmm.
block it completely from the inside. So again, that's kind of one of you solve one problem, but then you create another. I know
Right.
these are very niche cases, right? Because I'm not every flight. I mean, the vast majority of flights don't have this issue, but it's very high profile when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's I mean, now obviously this year's been horrible for it. And I think that's the problem. It's all on the news, right? In terms
Yeah.
of yeah. Um, Going on a slightly nicer topic, but still talking about plays, the thing I'm finding quite funny now, trying to deal with, is the fact that the UK is outside the European Union. So I've got
Mm.
somewhat interesting experiences when I have to then fly back and forth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to use my wife as leverage sometimes, so I can skip the UK queue and go into the EU national queue, even though I'm not an EU national. Um,
Yeah.
but compared to tourists, I have the residency card, even though I'm not a citizen, like in terms of
Mm-hmm.
nationality, quote unquote. I have residency in Spain,
Okay.
so I have a certain level of ability to skip certain queues, even though it's not made clear when you go into the airport. But
Mm-hmm.
I've done it a couple times with my wife, and I'm gonna try and use it because it can be a right faff if you're stuck in the UK only queue. That's
Yeah.
a slow line. It is quite useful. I just get the residency card out, and just go. I'm a resident. Can I skip this queue? Because it's just a
Yeah.
faff.
I will say that's one thing that I miss about having, like, when I was living in Japan, the fact that I had a registered Japanese address, like, let me get into, like, so I don't go to the Japanese national line, which is just flying, right? It's practically non-existent. But I also don't get into the general. They may have changed the system, but at the time anyway, you also didn't get mixed in with the general, like, we're just complete tourists line.
Right.
You had this sort of in between where you could be like, okay, yeah, I live in Japan, and I'm there, like, appropriately. I went through the visa process. I have this alien registration card, um, and I can prove it. And that, like, was this sort of middle thing where you could go faster. And coming back to Japan as a pure tourist after I left the jet program and moved back to the States, it was just like, oh, what a headache. All those years, I didn't know how good I had it.
Is it the same as the US? Like in Japan, if you're going as a tourist, you have to prove you got an outbound flight, you have to prove where you're staying and all this sort of thing, or is it a little bit looser?
They definitely ask for a hotel address. They don't require a complete itinerary, which is something I was a little surprised by, because like, one of the times I went back, I was like, okay, they asked for a hotel address, and I gave them a bunch. And I was like, this is where I'm going to be staying. And they were like, okay. And they only really needed the first one. And I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. But yeah, they don't require the outbound flight. At least they didn't when the last time I was there. I don't know. It's been 6 years, so
Mm. Hmm.
they might now. But at the time, they didn't, which was handy.
There was oh, so this is filling up my anxiety. There's a really good YouTube series called Jetlag. I know I've recommended it to
Oh
you
yeah,
because of Japan.
Jet Lag the game.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember I was disappointed in their first Japanese series. I hear they've since gone back and done a better
Oh,
job,
so
but
you didn't like the capture the flag one too much.
no, no.
Oh,
Well,
that's a shame.
I didn't think it was bad. It was just I was disappointed that it was all them riding the trains around.
Ah,
And
okay.
they didn't really go and experience Japan. I was like, you guys, like, Japan is a great place to visit, and all you guys are doing is this game.
Right. I guess it's all that's very much what their games about transport. I mean, the one they've done recently is hide and seek in Japan,
Okay.
and that one's a little bit different because even though you got the two of them who are the seekers are running around on public transport, the other one is goes to a hiding place and gets to chill out. until they get caught. So they do actually go and explore a little bit. Go, oh look, there's this nice castle. Oh look, I'm going to go and get some food or whatever. And it's got a slightly different vibe. So maybe that
Yeah,
might
that's nice.
tempt you.
Yeah, that's what I remember hearing. Because Strider, a mutual friend, got really into that series,
Hmm.
and uh, I told him my complaints, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's fair. Like you should check out their New Zealand game where they make a point of like engaging with the country that they're in while they're playing the game,
Right.
and their revisit to Japan has more of that sort of thing that you're asking for." And I was like, "Okay, maybe I'll check those out. I haven't actually gotten to it yet, but it's
That's
on my list."
That's very funny that Strider mentioned that one about New Zealand. I really enjoyed that series. I thought that series was
Hmm.
really good, but comparatively, it's the one that's probably the least performed. Like, it didn't perform very well.
Yeah, that's what he told me, was that this New Zealand series is probably up your alley, but it's their least well-performing series. Yeah.
I really liked it. I thought it was really neat. The game they came up with. It's almost like they made the the, the country like a board game. And you can take
Oh,
different routes
cool.
down it and do different challenges with a certain amount of risk, but then you have to come back together to get from the north to the south island. They have to go through the same point and stuff. I thought it was a really neat series. I'd happily rewatch it. I thought it was really cool. Um, that I'm really excited because at least for the next one, I don't know if it's entirely in the UK, but they definitely do go to the UK at some point because they showed a little
Mm.
trailer, with a YouTuber from the UK who I know, not personally, but just know of.
Hmm.
And you saw a red London double-decker bus going past, and Snuff, another mutual friend of ours, the one who's also responsible for the quizzes, right? Um,
Yes.
he's also a big fan of that show. Hey Snuff, there's a shout out for you. And I said, once I finished watching the last episode of the most recent Japanese one, I said they're going to the UK. We're going to the UK, and he was like, "Oh, how do you know?" And I was like, "Double decker bus, and there's Tom Scott, and it's raining. Oh yeah, we're back home."
Nice.
So I'm really intrigued to see what they do because there was an opportunity for the first European one they did that they could have gone to the UK, but just with the way it panned out, they didn't.
Hmm.
So I really can't wait to see what they do. It'd be really cool to see them running around the UK. If they do make it as far north as Scotland, we'll have to see. But yeah, so I'm. It'd be interesting to see if I can keep skipping these queues and trying to use
Hmm.
this privilege. But it really did bum me out the first time I had to go and get the passport stamped. Because even though it's
Hmm.
really cool to collect stamps at the back of your passport, it was like this sign to me that we've lost the free movement. And it was
Yeah.
just like, oh, damn it. And now we've got a different passport as well. It's changed colour because that's what you do after a country commits something like that, like tearing itself away from, um, the nearest trading bloc, and also think, let's get new passports to celebrate with a different colour. So okay,
Yeah.
if that's what makes you feel better, then I'll fill your boots.
Every time I've had three passports consecutively now, and every time I've gotten a new one, it's been like some sort of complete redesign, right?
uh,
The exterior might look similar, but every single time it's like we've updated security features. We've got like a microchip in this one, I think. I don't actually know if that's true, but I think I've read that. And it's like, wow, these are getting like bizarre. And I noticed there seem to be a lot fewer pages in the newest one that I got. I haven't done a direct comparison, but I was like, okay, well, I haven't filled any of these yet, so maybe that's a good idea, but I don't know.
it's all electronically stored nowadays, I guess. You don't need all the pages with the stamps, I guess. But
Yeah, maybe.
yeah, ah well, the joys. I'm just looking. We've got about 5 minutes left of the journey. I think it's Aalborg that I'm going to, so I'm just making my way. So, um, unless there's something very quick you want to mention, we probably shouldn't start anything too heavy. Um,
True. Yeah. Let me think about some of the other stories that I had in mind that like could be short. I guess they could all theoretically be short. Um, there was one time, so in general, I prefer trains. This is going to be a very short story. I prefer trains to flights.
mhm.
Um,
Good man.
just yeah, it's just a more convenient trip. You get more room. And again, I lived in Japan, right? So the trains that I'm thinking of, it's not like Amtrak,
Mhm.
where I remember again, Strider. He went through this whole trip where he was like, "I'm gonna take the train down to Disney World,"
Oh
and
yeah. Is it
he
like
got delayed for like 12 hours or something ridiculous because there was something on the track, and it was just like, what a nightmare.
right? Yeah.
But the thing with trains in Japan is they're all super nice, they're all super new. Well, not universally, but they're new enough that you're not going to feel like, oh, I'm sitting in an ancient relic. They're like always running on time. They're famous for like if they're even like 2 minutes late, you'll get an apology. Sometimes they'll write notes that you can take to work where the train company has apologized for making you late and
And some of them
um,
have Pokemon on the
on
outside
the
as well.
exterior.
Hmm.
Yeah, they've got a wide variety of different like experiences, and you can go like in different class levels, right? So you can travel like Guran Kurasu. I halfway between the Japanese pronunciation, whatever the original language was. It might be French because it should be Grand Class if it's English, but it's Guran Kurasu. And so the lack of the D at the end of grand makes me think it might be like taken from French.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
French or Latin.
Um,
Yeah.
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 Um, and you can go, they've got like super premium trains that you can pay to have an experience on. I went on a sleeper train one time up to the Sapporo Snow Festival, which was fun. Uh, so there's just a wide variety of them, and they're well run, and everything about the experience is way more convenient than an airplane, and you don't have to go through any like major security headaches, uh, which is a huge part of it, and like huge upgrade in my book.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I just remember there was this one time when it was the longest train journey I think I've ever been on, where not in terms of distance, just in terms of time, because I was going from Hachinohe, where I lived, to start my walk from the northernmost point in Japan. And so the Shinkansen, the bullet train, they've only got those up to the very like basis of Hokkaido, as far as I know, right now. And that's a new thing. When I was living in Hachinohe, when I first moved to Japan, Hachinohe was the end of the line. That was as far as you could go on a bullet train.
Oh.
And over the course of period of the time that I lived there, they extended it to Aomori, and then they've extended it now so that you can get to Hokkaido. But you can't get to Sapporo. I don't think you can do that yet. They're planning it, but it's not yet realized. At the time, you couldn't even get that far, right? Because this was before I left Japan. So I had to go, like, I could take a bullet train to Aomori, and then I had to go from Aomori Station over to Hokkaido on this traditional train, and then I got on another train that was just, I can't remember how long it was exactly, but I think it was like 12, 14 hours. It's a very long train. May have been shorter than that, but it was very long. And I just remember, like, I basically went from the start of that train all the way to the end of it. And every time, one of the things they'll do in Japan on trains is they'll come by with this little cart. You can buy meals, you can buy drinks, you can buy snacks, whatever. You're like, hey, I want this. And they'll be like, okay, here. You can buy souvenirs. They've got just all sorts of things that they'll try and sell you while you're on the train. And this train trip was so long that I just kept buying stuff off the cart. And so by the time I got off the train, the person who ran the cart like specifically bowed to me and was like, "Thank you so much for your like repeated patronage."
Oh.
And I just remember, I just associate that the train has since been discontinued because they have the plans for the Shinkansen coming,
Right.
and it wasn't worth it to them to keep running that train. So I was like, I now have this like sort of fond one, like now you can no longer experience this thing, right? I want to say once in a lifetime because that's what it is for me. It wouldn't have been for other people, but this unique experience of that particular train line where I went on it from start to finish, and like the person who was selling the snacks and things was just super happy that I kept buying stuff because there was nothing else for me to do. So I think that's a fun one to go out on in terms of just a nice, fun, relaxing, enjoyable little travel story.
Absolutely. I've not been on one as long as that.
I'm
I
probably exaggerating. I'll look it up. because I can probably find out how long it was back in the day. I'm sure I wrote it down somewhere, and I'll put it in the comments and watch. It'll be like half the time, right? It just because I was so bored, it felt twice as long. It was only actually 5 hours. I'll update it in the comment that I leave under the episodes.
And to be fair, some train journeys in the UK do take about 14 hours. They shouldn't, but the trains are so miserable. I mean,
Yeah.
I love trains. I mean, I'm a bit of a train, I loved trains since a kid. So, I prefer steam trains, but I mean, I'll ride on any other train, I'll be happy. But, yeah, the trains in the UK are a bit miserable. And they're often late and delayed, and because we talked about before, there's so many different companies, they don't
Yeah.
talk to each other as a bit of a faff. Whereas in Spain, the trains are a bit better. And the high speed train in particular is kind of nice. It is a little bit more expensive, but you can get between Barcelona and Madrid in 4 hours, which is
Hmm.
very quick. It's very, very fast. I mean, if you drove it,
Nice.
it'd probably be around 10 hours, I reckon, I think, or maybe about 8.
Wow.
I should probably do a quick as the crow flies calculation in terms of kilometers because I don't know exactly how far that is, and people are like, oh, 4 hours, yeah, but that's not very impressive, right? Let's try and do a quick calculation.
Hmm.
Uh, okay, right. So yeah, by train, yeah, 3 hours. Yeah, could be a 3 hour train between
Hmm.
um yeah Barcelona and Madrid, and
Nice.
yeah by car they're saying 7 hours.
Wow.
Uh, what's the distance? 600 kilometers. So what's that in miles? 360-ish miles or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I can't do the maths.
It's 1.6 times the number of
Yeah,
miles
it's
to get the
about
kilometers.
400
So
miles, just under 400
yeah.
miles. So that is very quick.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and there's high speed across other parts of other parts of Europe and stuff. And that's a funny thing. When I was in Germany, I thought the trains were amazing compared to the UK, and there were sometimes delays, but it worked well. They got a nice high speed line. But now apparently, maybe my expectation levels are different, but apparently the
Mm.
German trains have gone to shit.
Oh
They're
no.
always late. And I didn't know this until two things. A, because it was about jet lag. When jet lag went to Germany, um,
Hmm.
they did stuff in France, no problem. Went to Belgium, no problem. The minute they went to Germany, everything got cancelled. It screwed over the game, all this sort of stuff. And all the
Oh
comments were like,
no.
"Yeah, we knew this. As soon as you go to Germany, things were going to go wrong." And then there's also a funny YouTuber who I follow who is a Brit living in Germany. But he does like little skits,
Hmm.
making fun of British and German stereotypes or whatever. And
Hmm.
he's even got a skit. I'll send it to you afterwards, where he has two personas, his British persona and his German persona. So the British persona arrives and the German's like, "Oh, what time do you call this? You're late, blah blah blah," right? And then
Hmm.
in the end the British guy says, "Oh, by the way, yeah, I got a job." And the German's like, "What? Why would anybody hire you showing up late like this?"
Hmm.
And the British guy, "Yeah, I was surprised as well. They even told me the later the better." And then he turns around, he's wearing like the Deutsche Bahn t-shirts, like, "I work for the train company." They even told me some days I don't have to turn up. So there's clearly something's gone down in Germany. It's not the same, but compared to
Clearly.
the shit show in the UK, anything's impressive. So
Wow.
um, there you go. That was
Yeah,
decent.
the US doesn't even rate in that conversation. That's
Oh,
it's
it's such a
our reputation
shame.
is so terrible. Yeah,
Because your country was built on the railroad, right?
it was. And we tore them
Ah,
all apart
to
except
make
for
way
freight.
for the automobile. Yeah, you got good freight lines. That's about it.
Yep.
You tore it all up for the automobile. And
Hmm.
oh dear. Well, the UK invented trains, and then now we're the worst at them. At
Well,
least in Europe, anyway. It's pretty shameful, but
yeah, I just goes to show you've got to keep up with your infrastructure.
that's what I want to do. One of these, I'm very interested to go to Japan, and I do just as a train enthusiast. I want to ride on the Shinkansen. I will be,
Yeah,
I love that. I'd love
it's a
that.
great it's a great experience. I remember the first time I was just I was practically giddy. I was like, I'm on a bullet train. It goes 200 miles an hour. This is amazing.
And it doesn't get stopped by any freight trains along the way, right? Yeah,
Yep.
awesome. Oh well. I've parked up in Aalborg, and I've just paused the video so it didn't loop. But since we reached the end of the journey, I guess we should make this the end of the podcast, shouldn't we?
Sounds good to me.
Um, but that's nice. I'm sure we can think of other travel stories. If anybody's got any other funny travel stories of your own that you'd like to mention, feel free to leave them below in the comments and make us chuckle. And
Hmm.
if we think of any more, we can talk about them next time. And yeah, we'll have to see what we're going to talk about in the next podcast. I do have an idea for something that require a little bit of homework, but it's a very different type of homework. So we'll have to.
Ooh.
It might be sort of a very different type of conversation. I don't know how long we'd spend on it. It might be something that we'll just breeze through very quickly, or it might be something that we'll spend ages on. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see. We'll have to talk about it. But at least now we've got the podcast done very
Hmm.
ahead of time. But then means we can get through March, and then once we get into April, we can take stock and see where we're at.
Yeah,
Um,
we can reassess.
we'll have lots of stuff. Hopefully, we'll have lots of interesting stories from the Fear of Dracula tournament, and maybe Wingspan if I've done any more, and obviously your Translation Born will be on hiatus then at that point.
Yeah, it will.
Oh, the end of an
Yeah, we can
era.
talk about my well, sort of.
Yeah,
Won't be fully over, just on
end of an
break.
era for now.
Yeah, the pause of an era.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'll be on to my reliving the original experience of playing Bloodborne. That'll be interesting
Epic.
to talk about.
Epic. I'll be tuning in to see it because I know nothing about the game. I've just been watching it for the translation, but to see it, as you say, it's from 1.0 version. That'd be really cool. So I'll be tuning in.
Yeah, I
See
hope
what's
you
up.
enjoy it.
How are you gonna do it, by the way? I know we're setting this even long, but how are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do like lots of like little chunks? Are you gonna do like one really long form video per? Is it gonna be per week, per month? How you gonna? How's the upload gonna be?
So I'm gonna shoot for about 2 episodes a week. Each one of the episodes about half an hour to 40 minutes long. I found when I was doing the Chalice Chats, which is another sort of series in this vein that I ran, that was a pretty good thing. The first episode or two might be a little bit longer just because the opening area of the game is fairly extensive, and I'm going to want to get through it in a reasonable number of videos. So I don't know. But Monday is the first day of the 24th, I think it is. And then it's going to be Thursdays after that. So Mondays and Thursdays going forward from that point. And it's a little bit unclear exactly how much game time that's going to cover because I'll be cutting out certain things in between. If I have to die and do a bunch of repeated stuff, I won't waste your time with that. So I don't know. Again, I have no idea how long that's going to run, but hopefully that proves to be an accessible and useful thing and doesn't take forever because I don't want to spend so long on that experience that I need to push Translation Born back for far too long, right? There comes a point where I get tired of doing the Let's Play thing too, so I'll want to switch back and forth. And I did switch back and forth with the Chalice Chat series, and I feel like I sort of maybe did both a disservice for that, but maybe not. It's really tough to say. In the end, I'm glad I did it the way that I did. But if I was starting it all over from the beginning, I might do it differently. And this is sort of an opportunity for me to start the process over from the beginning. So we'll see what lessons I learn. And if the episodes need to get longer so that I can get through everything in a reasonable amount of time, then they'll do that. So we'll see where it goes. But that's the initial plan. Mondays and Thursdays, about 30 to 40 minutes of video, something like that. And we'll see how long that goes.
I guess we're gonna have the off the cuff unscripted a rook for
You
those.
will. You will.
Like we do for the Fear of Dracula commentaries. Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it'll be purely off the cuff, which is the only
Pure
relatively
emotion.
rare. Yeah, relatively rare on my channel, but you'll get it.
I don't know at least with me, I realize I'm quite manic when I don't have a script. I can get
Oh
quite
yeah.
emotional and into it. So it'll be interesting to see you taking on that vibe, that persona.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've learned is every time I approach one of these series where I do sort of a let's play in the moment sort of commentary, I imagine in my head that I'm going to be making all these eloquent points about the lore and the making of the video game and some of the translation points. And every time I actually try and verbalize that while I'm playing the game, it sounds like garbage. Like I don't even know what I'm talking about. And I keep interrupting myself because the action in the game is too riveting and it's a total mess. So I've learned from experience that nope, you just got to lean in to go full, just like experience the game as it's happening to you. If you want to make a point, stop playing the game.
Right.
Like turn and look at the camera, make your point, and then resume the game.
Hmm.
So hopefully I've learned enough about putting together a Let's Play series that this one won't be super boring. But yeah, I go back to the early Chalice Chats videos and I was like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, lesson learned. Obviously, I'll be tuning in. I'll be really keen to see. Because I think I've only been seeing. I've picked up the Translation Born quite late on in that journey.
Hmm.
So now I can see, I can experience the. I don't know if I'll ever get around to playing the game myself. Seeing it from the
Hmm.
beginning, it'd be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully it's something fun for newcomers and experienced players alike. I'm going to try and do the thing where I don't give any like major spoilers, but at the same time, I've got sort of a crazy lore theory that I want to throw out there and see if some people can pick it apart because that's part of the experience of Bloodborne. Like when it first came out, everyone was trying to come up with these crazy theories and figure out what the game was even about. So I sort of want to try and recreate that experience as best as I can. So I'll be throwing that one out and see. The other thing is I don't know how crazy it's going to sound to the rest of the lore community because I'm not so well connected that I know what is and isn't like accepted. So there's a chance they'll be like, "Oh, this is new and it's stupid," or they'll be like, "It's new and it's cool," or they'll be like, "It's old and it's stupid," or they'll be like, "It's old and it's accepted. Like this is just everyone plays like this." And I was like, well, I don't know.
Why are you talking like this is some sort of big revelation, Rook?
Yeah. So it'll
Well,
be fun to see what happens with that as well.
well, all the best with that. I'll be tuning in. I'll be seeing what you're up to. And hopefully the YouTube algorithm will be nicer to me and actually put it onto my homepage.
Yeah, hopefully
Um,
it'll remember.
mhm.
We'll see.
Good luck with that. We'll be tuning in to see what's happening. And yeah, thank everybody for listening. And I hope you enjoyed our sort of more sort of slightly less structured chat, but it's definitely a good one. So feel free to leave any comments
Yeah.
below with any
Yeah, this
thoughts.
was fun. And I hope we've kept you company.
Definitely. Amen to that. So take care, everybody. I hope you had a good March. You'll probably be seeing this at the beginning of April. So I hope you also have a good April. And we'll see you when we see you, I guess. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. And Rook, thanks for the chat as always.
Thank you, Scott Sword.